SCP-5000 is a story about a dead guy. Pietro Wilson was just an ordinary person when one day, for seemingly no reason at all, the SCP Foundation decided it would use its overwhelming power to wipe out all human life on Earth. The namesake of SCP-5000 is a nigh-indestructible mechanical suit that Pietro was able to climb into to escape attacking Foundation members, and the rest of his adventure recorded in the suit's data archives tells of his experiences wandering a dying world ravaged by all manner of monsters and anomalies. It's a fascinating, atmospheric, and pretty moving story about a man who never fully gave in to despair, and it ends with Pietro heroically sacrificing himself to essentially reset time to before the Foundation turned on humanity. Now, of course, the story is far more complicated and intricate than what little I've shared about it here, but it's not the focus of this video. Instead, I'm going to tell you about a game that's inspired by the story of SCP-5000 called SCP-5K. The premise behind SCP-5K is not necessarily that it takes place during the events of SCP-5000, but rather after it. In 5K, Pietro Wilson has already reset time back to before the Foundation attacked humanity, so now the rest of the world still has a chance to stop them. However, because Pietro was an otherwise completely insignificant power grid worker before the events of the story took place, following his experiences at this time wouldn't be all that interesting. So instead, the game is experienced from the perspective of various organizations within the setting and even some members of the Foundation itself as everybody prepares for the war. Now, the game actually started out as having nothing to do with SCP-5000 and was supposedly just going to be some other SCP-based game, but this would change due to complications, and with a new setup based on SCP-5000 in mind, Affray Interactive decided the best genre to explore such a premise would be a tactical horror first-person shooter, staying faithful to SCP's long-running focus on horror and military elements. The game was titled SCP Pandemic, and Affray Interactive launched a Kickstarter for the project on July 17th of 2021. 1 month later, on August 16th, the Kickstarter would end after reaching a stretch goal of $100,000 with a final funding of $104,772. The team got to work right away, releasing an early access alpha build in February of 2022 and constantly adding updates and making devlogs on their YouTube channel so their followers and supporters could stay informed on their progress. A few years, a merch store launch, dozens of patches and updates, a lead developer departure, and of course one name change later, we arrive at version 0.17, which brought with it the addition of the Discover program, a special testing initiative for the D-Class units stationed within Area 12, and the reason why I'm making this video. However, before we properly get started here, first I'd like to at least try and explain what it is I want to accomplish with this video, because I actually do have something to say for once beyond just, making a video for entertainment purposes. No, today I'm going to be getting up on my stupid internet soapbox so I can tell a bunch of experienced game developers how they should be doing their jobs. That's right, I'm going to be making a review, a partially biased, possibly uninformed, and probably already outdated review. But I don't know, there aren't really any out there on this game right now, and I feel like that's a void worth filling. However, just because I personally like 5K and have to be at least somewhat biased by that, it doesn't mean I'm going to lie about it. You'll soon see I have a healthy bit of criticism for this game, but instead of it coming from a place of cold, analytical indifference where I don't give a shit about video games and talking about them is just a job to me, it's instead coming from a place of passion and care for the product. Obviously, I am not affiliated with Affray Interactive in any way, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I can make a an unbiased review after they left comments on the other videos I've made, and when I hopped into a stream they were having one night, they recognized me. Was he the one who did the lore video?
I think so. Yeah, the Antarctica video, which was that's the best.
Yeah, that was the
best
great
synopsis I've
lore.
seen.
Everyone loved that.
Dude, the insanity of that is not lost on me at all. They watch my stuff, so full disclaimer, if you came here looking for boring rambling about technical specs or an apathetic plot summary, you're in the wrong place. I want to see SCP-5K succeed, and I'm presenting my criticisms in this video as my means of helping that come to fruition. If you don't believe any of that stuff and you think this video is going to be nothing more than just a commercial, I politely assure you that you're wrong, but I can respect that, and if you don't want to watch this for its review purposes, I hope you can at least find some entertainment from it. It's my first time doing this reviewy stuff anyway, so I don't know, it's uncharted waters, and I thought I'd get my feet wet reviewing something I like as opposed to something I hate. And with that out of the way, let's see what all this game has to offer, shall we? Area 12 is a covert Foundation outpost hidden deep within the wilderness of West Virginia in the United States, serving as one of the SCP Foundation's leading parabiological research facilities, and within SCP-5K, its level seems to function as the central experience that the rest of the game is built around. There is much to discuss with it, and we'll begin our examination by first exploring the level's story before heading over to its SCPs and enemies, and then we'll move on to its gameplay before finishing with assorted intricacies like environment design, atmosphere, lighting, or any other thoughts I may have. The Area 12 mission centers around a task force of UIU operators sent to infiltrate Area 12 after the entire SCP Foundation went dark and the UIU received disturbing intel of a worldwide Foundation conspiracy. The level is played from the perspective of an unnamed UIU agent whose team of co-op buddies had been ambushed and captured by Area 12 security forces, awakening within some holding cells after a containment breach has occurred and left the entire facility in a state of complete chaos. Okay, so not bad. The premise here is conveyed effectively enough with the locked door and bloody chair. It is decidedly convenient that the guards apparently forgot to confiscate all of the agent's gear, including his knife, but there are plans to include a full prologue that will hopefully serve as a more proper introduction, so we can safely give that a pass due to early access. In addition, I think it was a pretty good move to use the UIU as the player's first faction. For anyone unaware, within the SCP domain there are tons of ridiculous cults and global militaries and other organizations and whatnot, and the UIU basically serves as a very grounded, simple, good guy faction. They don't really use any anomalies during their operations like the Foundation does. They don't have magic powers like the GOC does. They're just a bunch of underfunded FBI dudes who nobody in the setting really takes seriously because they're ghost feds. Nice little kinda simple contrast faction to emphasize how crazy the setting is, and again, a very apt choice for first-time players who may be unfamiliar with the massive universe they're jumping into. So with that being said, what is the actual story of Area 12 itself? Well, to put it simply, there isn't one yet. There is no real sequential plot that I can summarize. Each level is physically connected and leads into one after the other, but the actions of the agent don't really have any explicit goal behind them. We don't even know why the containment breach happened. All we know right now is that the Foundation is in the midst of preparations for the coming war against humanity, and the agent's job here is supposedly to save the day. But the level in its current state just has no narrative whatsoever yet. In the first few sections of Chapter 1, the agent is guided by Crow Actual, our personal UIU Cortana, who directs him through the facility until he enters the main lobby where she tells him to go lift the lockdown and let her and her buddies inside. And then she never says another word for the entire rest of the level. Up until her disappearance, she was telling the agent to head over to the parking garage, which I thought was pretty funny because I assumed the implication was that she was just going to tell him to jack a car and get the hell out of there. But instead she leads him outside through the logistics division, through the tunnel systems, and back into Area 12 through reception, and then she tells him to go let her and her pals in, and That's the end of her. But the bottom line is that the agent in Area 12 is never given any concrete objective and never gets any real answers for anything. He has motivations, you know, he's the hero of course, but he's never told to go find and detonate the Area 12 safety nuke. He's never told to go kill a certain SCP. There's really not much for me to talk about. For the entirety of the level after Crow disappears, he's just wandering aimlessly, pressing buttons, and heading deeper into the nightmare for seemingly no reason at all. It's especially jarring too that when Crow tells the agent to go lift the lockdown and let her inside, he doesn't make any attempt to actually do it. He goes off and does something completely different and leaves her and her friends just waiting outside in the rain. Obviously, however, Area 12 is in early access, and Afray Interactive have made it quite clear they're going to be keeping the story of the game as close to their chest as possible, so it's no surprise there's not much plot for me to dig into yet. What there is plenty of for me to dig into already, however, is lore. Even though Area 12 has no actual narrative, I was able to make an hour-long video about its story, and half of that video was dedicated to just talking about the readings and other information about the world of the game. Within the game, in the current 0.17 build of Area 12, world building is provided through three means: text files that can be found on the tablets of deceased Foundation guards and downloaded onto the agent's little iPad, a couple of audio logs that can be listened to in the labs, and a few other things like scribbling on the walls and the occasional very brief expositional line from Crow. So let's start off with the tablet files. Each file is actually a written proposition detailing a potential operation that the Foundation can carry out when they fully begin their war on humanity. If you recall, in the original story of SCP-5000, the reason the Foundation was able to devastate the entire world so thoroughly was because they systematically used each of the extremely powerful SCPs in their possession on the unprepared populace. Each of these proposition files is brimming at the seams with world-building juice, listing and explaining countless SCPs to be used, discussing the coordination of thousands of simultaneous attacks all over the Earth, and even giving details on how other organizations like the UNGOC might cause problems for the Foundation thanks to their own little lore nuggets like their submersible supercarrier fleet. Keep the UNGOC in mind, by the way, we'll also be getting to them later. I absolutely love these operation documents. I think they're amazingly well written. They explain the SCPs mentioned in them so you don't even have to look them up, and they each really drive home just how ruthless the Foundation is, but my only issue with them is actually their length. Now, not to sound condescending or anything, but unlike a lot of people who play video games, I actually don't mind reading in a game, and if I like a game setting, I'm more than happy to sit down and suck up every bit of world building it has to offer me if it's juicy enough. But I would definitely understand if someone felt different and considered having to read entire pages of writing a bit of a pace killer. However, so long as players never have to read entire pages of writing to understand the game's plot, I think these lore documents can be as long as Afray wants them to be, and let me tell you why. See, my philosophy about storytelling in a game, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir if any Afray devs are watching, but I still think this deserves saying. The key to a game with a good story is that you keep the story in the game and the lore in everything else. It's my opinion that a player should never have to read a single lore document or listen to any audio logs or do anything like that to be able to at least understand a game's plot. All of that information can and should be conveyed through what they experience by just playing. Many games often confuse lore for story and end up burying integral things like character motivations and important plot points in paragraphs of obscure writing or hours of rambling in audio logs. All that background information stuff that you get in lore documents is there to provide extra depth and juice for people who are interested in the setting. It should never be required reading like it's an English class for a player to have to sift through just so they can figure out why the plot happens. With that being said, I think I can confidently say that Afray Interactive understands that already, and right now they're simply keeping that main story to themselves until the full release. I've asked them about the story multiple times and they've all been sworn to secrecy, so the fact that the only story we have right now is just a lore is most certainly not due to them not understanding how to write a game story, but instead that Area 12 is simply not ready to deliver its story fully yet, and that's perfectly fine. Besides, what they have given us already with the world building, like I said, is very juicy, and when we get to the Ghosts of the South South Gate mission, you will see that Affray Interactive knows how to tell a damn good story. So I have full confidence in them that they can do the same thing with Area 12. And that's really all that can be said about the level's story. Now it's time to move on to its SCP roster, starting not with SCP-173, but the actual first SCP encountered in Area 12, SCP-7566. SCP-7566 is a species of large carnivorous hard-shelled cephalopods whose article on the SCP Foundation website explains that they were first found in 1976 in a series of American cave systems. SCP-7566 has been observed to use environmental objects as shelter, similar to how a hermit crab might use a snail shell to protect itself. But obviously there aren't many giant snail shells laying around Area 12, so after breaking out of containment, it has instead opted to conceal itself using doors. Door squids are tremendous, great visual design, fun gimmick, and their introduction is very well done. There's a shiny keycard laying right on the floor in front of the creaking, broken, very clearly suspicious wooden door, and you know something's behind it, but that keycard eggs you on, and bam! Excellent first SCP, top notch, but two small issues. Number one, there are only 2 of these guys in all of Area 12 in the game's current build. Now, of course, this also can be forgiven because of early access, but I just want to make it clear that I think these guys are amazing and I want to see more of them, especially with this reward mechanic like with the keycard. Having to sneak right up to a door squid to grab a fancy gun or meds or ammo is an awesome system, and I think it could be made into a reoccurring thing. The other issue, however, is that, and this is pretty prevalent throughout the game right now, all that great stuff I read about it being a cephalopod and the explanation for why it uses a door in the first place because it's like a shell, which is really clever and just like the most SCP thing ever, I got all from the website. The article for it is awesome and was written by the devs themselves. It has all this cool info on how it prefers darker areas so it's harder to detect, it mimics knocking sounds to draw its victims closer, and it even explains how these huge things would have spread throughout Area 12 in the first place by stating that the first specimen captured was a pregnant female whose young were able to escape into the recesses of the facility where they would grow in hiding to their current massive sizes. That's all incredible stuff, but the problem is that there's no information on this thing whatsoever in-game. Crow Actual doesn't say anything about it, there's no tablet files or audio logs for it, so by just playing you would never know all that awesome stuff about it being a shell-wearing cephalopod and whatnot, and so you would just think of it as another weird monster. I really hope all that information gets brought into the game somehow, but regardless though, these guys are great and I'm looking forward to seeing more of them. Next up on our list is the tried and true SCP-173, one of the most iconic SCPs ever created and a staple of SCP games, the statue. If you're unaware, SCP-173's gimmick as an SCP is that it's completely indestructible, basically capable of teleporting, and extremely hostile to all human life. If you aren't watching it, it will try to teleport to you and snap your neck. However, if you are watching it, it can't move and you'll be safe. This guy is also great and has been brought into SCP-5K immaculately. I very much like his visual redesign. He's got a spooky little introduction with the camera on the monitor going dark, and the environment is effectively designed in a way to give him avenues to try and attack the agent. His second encounter feels a little tacked on, however. It takes place in a small warehouse section later on by the water treatment plant, and while it's not as tightly designed, I thought it was still creepy enough. Thankfully though, SCP-173 has an article for it already that can be read in-game, which is great to see and gives me additional confidence that the other SCPs will get the same treatment. Our next SCP is not one with a formal designation. Instead, it's a bioengineered hybrid referred to as the Psi Resonator, and its article on the unofficial SCP-5K wiki states that it was created from an Area 12 parabiological research initiative called the Vector Program as a combination of 2 other SCPs. Its design is pretty interesting, looks like a monster alien squid dog thing, but its mechanics are not. It's called a resonator, so you might think it could have something to do with sound, which would make for some really neat encounters, but nope, it's just a dog enemy that makes a weird clicking noise sometimes. Not much else for me to say about it. Next up on our list is SCP-3199, another iconic SCP whose article on the SCP wiki explains that it's a monstrous blend of DNA from a variety of different animals, including snakes, chimpanzees, humans, and of course chickens. Now they're given quite a bit of build-up. You first see the shadow of one before it scurries off, you see their horrifying nests scattered throughout the area they're in, and there's a little fake out before you eventually come face to face with them. To start, the game only throws 2 of them at you, a couple of loving, dedicated parents, but the fight is over quick. Listen, I won't mince words, SCP-3199 is probably the single least game-ready enemy in SCP-5K right now. It's harder to die to these things than it is to kill them. They have this pitiful charge attack that's painfully easy to dodge. They don't really have that much health, and their pathfinding is so bad that when I first played and hadn't read their SCP website article yet, I actually assumed the implication with them was that they were blind. And weirder still, after he murders the parents, the agent heads over to another storage room where he sees a group of 3199 hatchlings sleeping in an elevator shaft. When he presses the call button to bring the elevator down, the hatchlings wake up and begin crying out in distress since they see they're about to get crushed. And you would think to yourself, oh boy, now there's going to be some more adults coming because of all the noise, but the adults only show up after the elevator reaches the bottom, so you only have to fight them if you really want to. I find their current implementation into the game to be pretty lackluster. I think these guys could be a good SCP to use as maybe like a basic monster enemy or something, but they're gonna need a lot of work. Next up, we have what I consider to be the single best and most promising SCP in the whole game. SCP-1262, the Seed of Destruction. SCP-1262 is an anomalous carnivorous plant whose article on the SCP website explains it was first discovered in Iceland after engulfing and consuming a group of people before growing hundreds of meters tall and spewing toxic spores all over the surrounding area. It's an apocalypse plant capable of growing through basically any surface to boundless proportions. Such a tremendous SCP idea, and I'm very happy to see plants getting their much deserved appreciation as the strange and otherworldly organisms they've always had the potential to be instead of just being relegated to background scenery. It's sick because this is what they do in real life. The way it's completely consumed the dormitories and the D-class chambers is like if those vines you see crawling up old houses got cranked up to 100, you know? From my analysis, SCP-1262 is actually shaping up to be the big bad of Area 12, or at least one of them, and I'm all for that. The design space of a plant is limitless compared to that of, say, a basic monster or a humanoid or an animal, and there's a ton of possibilities. I love seeing it choking out entire hallways and rooms, enormous plant growths lining the walls, sap dripping from the ceiling and collecting on the floor, spores and gases billowing from branching roots and giant bulbs, and of course the hissing noises of the wonderfully unsettling spitters. Spitters are unique sentient extensions of 1262 that fire crystallized spikes of hardened resin at their targets, and are the primary means 1262 uses to defend itself. Very cool SCP idea, tons of possibilities, and I hope we get to see more. Now, our next SCP is kind of a strange one, SCP-098, Surgeon Crabs. The SCP website article for these little fellas explains that they're a very rare kind of large crustacean with highly unusual hunting techniques. Surgeon crabs travel in packs on both land and sea, and when they find prey, they'll surround it whilst mimicking the sounds that the prey makes and slicing it open while spraying an adhesive fluid on it to immobilize it. Ugh. Yeah, that's all well and good, I guess. It could make for a pretty damn unique enemy, but all we have in game right now are big crabs. No mimicking, no adhesive fluid, just buggy AI and some basic slash attacks. Before the update, they looked even weirder too. They were literally just real-life Japanese spider crabs with really nothing different about them at all, despite maybe that they were dark greenish instead of red and they had the knife hands. And I don't think the water treatment plant was the best place to introduce this enemy. It looks really weird crawling along these tight walkways that it's clearly visibly way too large for. Actually, now that I think about it, one thing I did like about SCP-3199, the big chicken monster SCP, was that at least to me, it seems as though they must have been recently transported to Area 12 in these crates and they broke out of containment right here in the logistics division. You can see they set up shop right here in all the truck trailers and the place looks suitably messed up. When you're walking through it, it doesn't feel jarring when a monster chicken shows up around the corner because you're in its disgusting flesh nests. Conversely, with SCP-098, there's nothing about the environment at all to make a giant evil crab not seem out of place. It's very jarring. Like, it's just a big crab in a water treatment plant. It makes no sense. We don't see a containment cell for it. There's no den it's made. It's about as jarring as seeing an actual spider crab in an industrial facility in real life. Regardless, I can certainly give points for it being an interesting enemy idea. Nothing is truly off limits in the SCP universe, but I think it definitely needs some work. The seventh and final SCP of Area 12 is SCP-7528, who has a very unique encounter with an even more unique article on the SCP website that's framed as a series of communications and files shared amongst officials and researchers at Area 12. And it's just a doozy of a read. Words cannot do it justice. However, despite the fact that its article is extremely extensive and even makes mention of a bunch of other crazy SCPs, features dozens of characters, and suggests that bamboo and pandas are all actually somehow components of a quantum computer network? SCP-7528 itself is actually rather simple. It's basically a malevolent living program that can spread from device to device, but unlike regular computer viruses, it can also affect the brains of humans as well. And if it's able to assimilate into their minds, that person will effectively become an instance of SCP-7528, and of course they'll die. Matter of fact, I think we actually get to see some of these 7528 assimilated people in game too, but rather strangely they don't actually have any effect on the agent in any way, and they just sort of walk toward him and stand there. That's kind of weird, but anyway, let's get back to 7528 itself. Now, my understanding of 7528 and the unofficial wiki's understanding as well had been that it comes in 5 forms, starting at its first form with minimal lethality before going to its 5th form as the agent takes out more and more of its screens. SCP-7528's whole gimmick is that it kills you if you stay in its line of sight for long enough, and it needs the screens to manifest itself and move around. So when the agent shoots them, he pisses it off and it'll start moving quicker and also kill him quicker. But when I actually played and recorded for this video, it would seemingly just jump right to level 5 aggression even if I hadn't shot at any screens. To top it off, this area is already pretty labyrinthine and you have to go around searching for these key cards while trying to avoid all the killer TV screens, and the maps are basically worthless because they don't tell you where the actual key cards that you need are, and it's just goddamn impossible. Not only is it hard enough to find out where the key cards are to begin with, it's exponentially harder to try and make a mad dash to get to them before the agent goes insane and his head blows up. In its current state, it's my opinion that SCP-7528's implementation into the game is simply not fun. This encounter is just an absolute slog, even with a partner or two, and like I said, it's inconsistent. Sometimes it's at minimal aggression for like a split second, then it cranks right back up to level 5 even though I never shot a single screen. Like, what am I doing wrong? Okay, let me try and logically think this through. So I'm not given any ammo besides only what's in my gun to get through the area, which discourages me from shooting out TV screens, right? Okay, so if that's the case, then I guess I'm supposed to run through it all, right? No, that's impossible. Even if you somehow know where to go already, 90% of the time 7528 will kill you long before you can make it there. Okay, so I try and shoot out screens as strategically as possible. That's how you win, right? I mean, it's gotta be just that simple. Just take out each screen that poses a threat on your run to the next hidey hole. No, that's not it either. Look at how many goddamn screens there are in this place. If you take out one screen, there's another one 2 inches to the left of it, and 7528 will just hop to that one and kill you. Also, a wonderful mechanic is if you shoot a screen, guess what? If 7528 is already on the screen, shooting it won't even do anything. It'll just sit right there on the broken screen as if it's still on, which doesn't even make sense, and I guarantee it will get you killed. I must have died like a billion times getting stuck in a corner and shooting the screen that was looking at me, and I died anyway because 7528 just wouldn't care and would stay on the screen. But you know what the best part is? You're not even supposed to do any of this. All of this trying to run past the screens and hunt for keycards and codes is bullshit. The door code you need is right here in the very first theater that you are encouraged to leave in the beginning, mind you, because of 7528's presence, and the only keycard you need is on a guard like 5 feet away from the starting area. Once you get those two things, you're in the clear, you shut the power off, and then you leave, you beat the level. It's a mess. It's a complete mess, and the only saving grace is the dev message button in the beginning that says this whole place is getting trashed anyway, so hooray, I guess. And those were all 7 of the SCPs of Area 12. I kind of forgot about SCP-621, but I'm not sure we should even really count it as being included yet because none of its actual features have been implemented at all. SCP-621 is said to have combined with SCP-1262, and it's another kind of awesome plant SCP that controls people's minds, but right now they're just these blue flowers that show up on 1262 sometimes. You would never even think of them as a separate SCP, and I just always assumed they were some special flowers that grew on 1262, so I don't know. Alright, now for this next segment, just like I did with the story of Area 12, I would now like to summarize my thoughts on the SCPs of Area 12 as a whole. And before doing so, I'd like to remind everyone that SCP-5K is in early access. All I can provide with this video is a snapshot review of the current 0.17 build of Area 12. That functions as a review for any viewers who are considering purchasing the game right now, and also as feedback for the developers at Affray Interactive so I can do my job as an early access player and fan. Full transparency, I have written and recorded and rewritten and re-recorded and rewritten and re-recorded this section many times, and boy do I regret choosing this game for my first video where I actually have to use my stupid brain and perform critical thinking. Earlier with the story of Area 12, it was easy for me to just give the complete lack of plot a much deserved pass because obviously Affray can't just give away the entire story of their game before it's fully released yet, and what they were giving us anyway with Area 12 alone was pretty good, and Ghosts of the Southgate solidified that even further, and so on. But the SCPs are different. With them, we've been given a clear look at how they work mechanically, their visual designs, and the role they're going to be playing in the level. And now I can make much more of an actual judgment on their overall quality. In addition, Area 12 isn't just some side mission or extra game mode, it's going to be the main campaign of SCP-5K and the primary reason that most players will purchase it, so arguably it needs to be the absolute best the game has to offer. With that in mind, well, to be blunt, my honest feedback is that the current SCP roster of Area 12 is profoundly lackluster. While exploring the 0.17 build of Area 12, the SCPs do not have any sort of overbearing presence that you'd hope they would during a site-wide containment breach. 3 of the 7 SCPs we have are basic monsters with no special features, and even then they don't even function properly as enemies. Their AI doesn't work, they don't do any of the things their articles say they should do, they just run up to the player and try to whack them, and they can barely even do that. The other, more unique SCPs show much more promise, particularly SCP-1262, which I've said before is easily the best SCP in the game right now. It actually does have this kind of wondrous and horrific aura about it that makes you feel as though the entire facility is being consumed by an incredibly powerful anomaly. The other SCPs that aren't monsters, however, 7566, 173, and 7528 are either too rare or poorly executed. 7566 can't do its job and make exploring Area 12 any more tense because it only shows up twice. 173 is in the exact same situation. It's not winning any points in the originality department, but its redesign is fantastic and it's executed well enough, but it too only shows up twice, and 7528's encounter in the theaters is a broken, frustrating mess. The worst part about Area 12's SCPs, however, is just how few there are, and if we're gonna go the route that Area 12 is highly specialized and only contains a few SCPs, well, that's just a cop-out and only makes it that much less interesting. There are no safe class SCPs to serve as a contrast and give the place any kind of depth, there are no weird abstract SCPs that make the world any more interesting, and 7 SCPs for an entire Foundation facility that that's experiencing an extreme containment breach is very disappointingly low. And that's really all I can say. All I can give you now is my honest feedback on what we have right now. The 3 monster SCPs need a lot of work in basically all of their aspects except their models. 7566 and 173 are good but way too rare. 7528 simply doesn't work, and 1262 is the only one that leaves a positive impression. Basically, everything about Area 12's SCPs are unfinished, and early access or not, that's what's for sale right now, and that's all I can review. Is it possible for me or anybody to predict with certainty what they'll be like in the final build? No. Do they all show some degree of promise? Yes, absolutely. Am I preaching to the choir with my complaints, and is Affray already working to resolve the issues I've mentioned with things like their AI, the frequency of their appearances, and the total count of SCPs at Area 12? I believe so. I mean, they even had an amazing safe class SCP in the form of Dave in earlier builds of the game that will almost certainly be making a much coveted return. Do I have faith that Affray will be able to fix them all and transform the current experience of Area 12 into one whose SCPs transform it into an otherworldly, horrifying, and fascinating place and strengthen the description of SCP-5K as a tactical shooter? Well, there's still much more for us to discuss with that question, so stick around. Alright, that's all I have for the SCPs of Area 12 at the moment. Now I'll discuss its enemies, starting with the zombies. Yes, this game has zombies. These chaps are former humans who were converted by SCP-008, an extremely virulent prion that turns people into zombies. They're zombies. They run towards you and you shoot them. I guess I can give points for the fact that they sometimes actually get back up after you shoot them, which is pretty cool and something I don't see a lot of video game zombies actually do. But there's nothing else I can say about them. We've all fought zombies before. Although I have to ask again, why do some of them wear clothes and others are booty naked? Like, the obvious implication is that these guys were in the nude when they were converted, so how the f did that happen? Why were so many people naked when the SCP-008 containment breach took place? Anyway, the other enemies of Area 12 are the Foundation guards and the D-class personnel, who function as our run-of-the-mill humans with guns enemies. Let's start with the guards. Before we even discuss their behavior, let's begin with the first thing you'll probably notice about them: their strange voices. Now, in the story of SCP-5000, the reason the Foundation turns on the rest of humanity and decides to try and kill them all is actually because they discover something so repulsive within the human psyche that the only reasonable course of action they could decide upon was that they needed to kill every single person on Earth. It's never fully explained what exactly that something is, and it's the big mystery behind the story of SCP-5000. What is it that could be so horrifying to make the Foundation do what they did? Well, regardless of what the answer to that question might be, within the story, the Foundation was able to find a way to cure some of themselves of that something. And a convenient side effect was that upon being cured, a person loses all of their ability to feel things. They don't feel fear, sadness, empathy, or even pain apparently, and all of that is a big help considering their new goal now is to slaughter as many innocent people as they can. So why am I explaining all this? Well, one, it's important for understanding the motivations of the Foundation in this game, and two, it directly affects the voice acting for the guards. Without putting too fine a point on it, the Foundation guards have literally the most robotic, deadpan, and lifeless line delivery I may have ever heard from a video game enemy.
Contact reestablished.
Even when they're dying, it sounds less like they're in horrible pain and more like they're just having trouble breathing. But it does make perfect sense within the story. Remember, they've lost all their ability to feel. I really don't have a problem with the voice lines since I know the explanation for them and I actually find it kind of clever, but I've seen a lot of people complaining about it and many of them seem to assume that they're just really poorly delivered lines, which actually I can't really blame them for since, once again, none of the information I just shared about how they're cured and they lost all their feelings and whatnot is ever actually given even in game, so that is definitely something that's going to have to be addressed at some point. Have a lore document about it, have Crow Actual say a quick line about it. Something's got to be done here. Now again, I understand the whole less is more approach to video game storytelling and how for some reason a lot of people really love when a story is buried in layers upon layers of obscurity and the only way to understand it is to watch some boob tuber talking about it, but here it's actively conflicting with player perception. You know what I mean? Like, people aren't going to listen to these lines and think, oh gee, there must be some narrative element that explains why the voice acting is shit. They're going to hear flat, emotionless voice acting and come to the conclusion that it must be bad voice acting. I think this angle of the emotionless guards could work and work pretty well, but we're definitely going to need at least some breadcrumbs here if you want to go that route. Now, the D-class personnel are in a somewhat similar boat with their voice acting as well. And yes, they are also classified as enemies when they're found alive, since they're hostile not only to the Foundation guards who imprison them at Area 12, but also to the agent himself, since they are death row inmates and he's a Fed. Now, I don't want to sound like a dick because I'm assuming the D-class lines are just like placeholder voice lines that somebody from the Affray office did for playtesting, and I don't need to hit on them too hard because I'm hoping they're gonna get changed anyway, but yeah, to avoid giving anyone at Affray the wrong idea, no, I do not think this is what a guy who's on death row would sound like, and do think they definitely need to be updated. Alright, so now it's finally time to discuss the human enemy AI. It's Cheeks. It's just straight up early access Cheeks. These guys are so f***ing dumb. I guess another side effect of being cured is that you lose your ability to see as well. The only time you'll die to these idiots is if you're practically begging for them to kill you, or if they randomly decide to early access laser you from across the room. Enemies do not melee, jump over stuff, throw grenades, or even really say anything at all to each other. They just shuffle around in this bizarre stiff pose like they've got poop in their pants. And while they actually can sprint, I think I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually seen them do it. I mean, there's not really much to be said other than that they're nothing more than moving targets and are simply not fun, which brings me to Area 12's overall gameplay. Before we get into the level's gameplay experience as a whole, however, let's start with the player character, the agent. I've seen it described by some of the devs that SCP-5K is fear with SCP monsters, but as we know, instead of playing as the karate-kicking, bullet-time using dual-wielding super soldier, the Point Man, we get to play as flavor of the day silent protagonist number 439,526,731,224. But instead of just being the usual pair of silent arms, we do at least get to see the agent's entire body, so I do give points for that. That's big for immersion. When it comes to his movement, the agent's actually no slouch. He's no Subject 106 or Jack Cooper, but he doesn't move like he weighs 1,000 pounds like the Jagoffs and Ready or Not do. He's got no arbitrary stupid stamina system, thankfully, so he can sprint forever, which is always good, and he's got hops too, especially if he can put some momentum into his jumps. In addition, he can lean, another awesome ability that always earns points in my book. I love being able to lean around corners in FPS games, even if it's not ever 100% necessary. I don't know, something about it makes the character feel that much more dynamic. Unfortunately, however, the guy absolutely sucks at vaulting. The moment you try and get this guy to climb over a waist-high barrier, it does that video game thing where suddenly he weighs 1,000 pounds and he has to go all the way around. Something interesting about him too is that he has this Dying Light survivor sense thing he does, where if you press a certain key, he puts his gun down and any nearby objectives are highlighted with an arrow. Cool ability, helpful for maybe finding a button you can't quite spot. My favorite thing about the agent by far though is his watch. He's got a special UIU watch on his wrist that actually functions as his health bar. See, the white line around the edge will deplete and change color if he takes damage. Sick. The health on the arm thing is phenomenal, design wise and gameplay wise, great for playing without a HUD, and the other player characters even have their own unique wrist health indicators too, which is amazing and I can't praise them enough. Stupendous, well done, these are dope. And speaking of taking damage, when the agent gets hit, he can can heal himself by finding medical supplies, med packs, bandages, and of course pills, which are just about everywhere in the place. There's no animation for healing either, it's instantaneous, but the agent can't carry any supplies around with him, so you just kind of have to top off every time you find meds, but health was never really too much of an issue in this level. It's handled well enough. Only possible criticism for the agent is his night vision. If you press N, he'll flip down his NVGs, and now you can see in low light environments. Looks really sick, and it's pretty helpful, but there's this really overblown depth of field that makes aiming down your sights really hard to do, and you can't turn it off, so you can only really hip fire with it. However, you never have to use the NVGs anyway though, because the agent has a handy dandy infinite battery life flashlight, which means it's basically a non-issue. Anyway, so yeah, I don't think I can recall any major issues with our hero. I never felt he was too slow or too weak or anything like that. All in all, the agent's pretty inoffensive. He's a bit boring, as basically all silent protagonists are, but he gets the job done. So, with all this info about the story, SCPs, enemies, and the player character in mind, now we can finally discuss the level's actual gameplay as a whole. Let me start this section by first answering the $20 question. Does the 0.17 build of Area 12, the main campaign of SCP-5K, fit the description of fear with SCP monsters? I mean, that comparison's not to be made lightly. Anyone can make a game like Fortnite, anyone can make a game like Dark Souls, but when you say you want to make a game like Fear, it's different waters. Well, when it comes to the 0.17 build of Area 12, no, SCP-5K is not Fear with SCP monsters. It's much better described as a very unfinished Half-Life with SCP monsters and co-op. But it may not be as far off from Fear as you might think, specifically in one design aspect. More on that in just a bit though. First, let's break the level down by chapter. Area 12 is split into 3 chapters. Chapter 1, Piercing the Veil, Chapter 2, Hollow Men, and Chapter 3, Containment Breach. Chapter 1 is far and away the longest chapter of the level, and it's a pretty run-of-the-mill romp through a busted old zombie and monster-infested collection of, to be blunt again, incredibly generic video game environments. We got warehouses, a parking garage, a few hospital labs, and a basic industrial setting. The formula here is as basic as it gets. Enter a new area, fight a bunch of enemies, find a passcode, turn a valve or press a button, and then head on to the next area. Except for like one single time with the gas valve fight in the destroyed parking garage where the objective was actually made a little interesting, the objectives in Chapter 1 are all really just padding. Remember, the agent doesn't really do anything. He doesn't really kill any SCPs for good. There are no other characters he meets. There is no greater goal behind his being here right now. All he does is move from one area to the next. Chapter 2, as I mentioned previously, is just the SCP-7528 encounter. That's it. This whole awesome theater area has nothing else going on in it besides 7528, and again, you never even have to go through it anyway. The first half of Chapter 3 starts off a bit differently and slows things down quite a bit to let you explore the Area 12 dormitories that have been consumed by SCP-1262, an honestly breathtaking and very unique environment that could make for some awesome kinda investigative gameplay. But none of that is implemented yet, so right now it's another passcode hunt with a few spitters sprinkled in. Even still though, it's pretty good. Once again, it's just so hard to dislike 1262. The second half of Chapter 3 is also a very cool environment, the D-class prison systems which are being throttled by SCP-1262 as well. And although the chaos of a prison riot isn't exactly felt in the one single tertiary D-class block the agent goes through, the climb up the central staircase and the main chamber is really fun and honestly what I consider to be probably the best section in the entire level. Number 1, it's a creative, interesting set piece, a giant destroyed SCP Foundation prison compound flooding with water. Number 2, there are some revolting D-boys strutting around to at least give you something to do as you make the climb, and number 3, it's got an awesome SCP present in the form of SCP-1262 which influences the entire section. 1262 also gives you something to do. It blocks the agent's path with its tendrils and transforms the objective objective from the usual boring button press or valve turn to instead a race against the clock to get 1262 to retract its tendrils by shooting its glowing bulbs before the water level rises too high and the agent drowns. Without putting too fine a point on it, it's really one of the very few times that Area 12 feels not only like I'm playing an SCP game, but that I'm playing a fresh and fun SCP game. Once again, with 1262, it feels like I'm actually trying to survive and battle against an incredibly powerful anomaly instead of a really dumb chicken monster or a bull squid. All of these other segments in the other chapters where you fight against mobs of painfully generic zombies, battle if-then statement mooks who can barely move, slaughter awkward spongy monsters who are more confusing than scary, and complete drawn-out repetitive objectives, all combine to create a gameplay experience for Area 12 that I'm sorry to say I simply do not like and cannot in all honesty recommend in its current state. Alright, now I gotta say an ugly truth I know a lot of people, including myself, don't want to hear, but it has to be said. Area 12 is not a tactical shooter. It is mathematically a horde shooter. The vast majority of combat the agent engages in, save for maybe one or two exceptions like with the prison chamber climb, is done against hordes of dumb basic enemies that need to be kited around the environment. And all the other battles against the mooks with guns are so broken that there sure as hell isn't any tactical element to them. To me, a tactical shooter is one that isn't necessarily slow paced, but just involves very strategic positioning to take out equally skilled groups of enemies, or at least ones that require some degree of thought being given to kill them besides just do it before they get close to you. And none of the battles in any of Area 12's 3 chapters fit that description. They're either horde fights or Call of Duty shooting galleries. That's all we got right now. So in conclusion, Chapter 1 really doesn't have anything notable about it except for the very brief opening with 173 and the door squid and the gas valve fight. Chapter 2 is 7528 and Chapter 3 is carried by 1262, but even then it's really only half decent. Once again, in the interest of providing my genuine feedback that I reiterate I do not intend to be derogatory or meant to scare anybody, but instead honest and helpful, if this early access look at Area 12 is in even any small way indicative of what the final product will actually be like, well then I think there may be some degree of cause for concern. Let's just do the math. Chapter 1 has the opening segment and the gas valve fight, which is not an entire segment on its own, but will be generous and count it as one, which means that only 2 out of the 5 segments of Chapter 1 are any good. Chapter 2 has the segment with 7528 and a comically brief segment after with some foundation guards that I haven't even mentioned until now, so we'll just count Chapter 2 as one segment. And Chapter 3 has a very unfinished opening segment that once again 1262 carries to about half decent, and then we have the prisons, which we can safely count as decent. That's 3.5 segments of the level out of 8 total that are any decent. I mean, even when it comes to like investigative gameplay where you're just hunting around for stuff, I know there's no story yet, but there's like literally nothing. What's especially striking to me about the level is just how lifeless it feels. Yeah, I know everybody's supposed to be dead and all that, but Area 12 doesn't feel like a place people actually work at, and it doesn't feel like a place that keeps scary monsters hidden away underground either. I totally get that it's supposed to be like sterile and brutalist and inherently boring because it's the SCP Foundation, but if you're gonna go that route, you gotta make up for it somehow. Unfortunately though, the gameplay of Area 12's 0.17 early access build as a whole is boring. Now, some of you watching may have been gnashing your teeth at me while listening to all that, saying, "It's early access, you idiot." But just because something is in early access, it doesn't mean it's free of criticism. Quite the opposite, I would hope, actually. And my concerns I've mentioned here with Area 12 are only compounded by other factors that we'll just have to get to later in the video. Sorry, but if you've made it this far, you're probably in it for the long haul anyway, so hang in there. If I haven't made it clear enough, it's very important to me that I structure my thoughts in a way that's logical, fair, and most importantly helpful to the developers and community. I want to do it justice. And right now I'm trying to lay out all the perspective I can on the game's current overall state and what it could possibly mean for its future. And once again, I'm not making this video as a way to tear it down, but instead to try and help it out the only way I can, by being honest with my feedback, even if it pains me to say it. But, and this is a huge, fat, augmented butt that I have been waiting to say for a while. In terms of tacticality, one of, if not the main selling points of SCP-5K, there are very clear and uplifting indications throughout the level that Affray Interactive does know how to set up a very proper gunfight. To explain this, I'd like to examine 3 particular gunfights that happen in Area 12. The parking garage fight, the very brief opening battle of Chapter 2 that was so brief I haven't even mentioned it until now, and the even more brief battle in the transport halls. First off, in the parking garage, there are these really cool cars everywhere. Right now, there's basically nothing useful that can be done with them. There's no items in them, the agent can't crawl through or under them, and just like in real life, they don't actually block any bullets. But I'm not sure being able to open the doors of cars like this is something I've ever seen before in an FPS game, and if there's a way to make doing it actually useful, say if you open a door, the agent can crawl into the car where he's actually safe from at least a few bullets, or maybe he can do some other crazy shit like release the brake. I don't know, there's a lot of possibilities. If these cars can be made into meaningful methods of interacting with the environment during a fight, I think it could definitely be a step in the right direction in making this game more strategic and tactical as opposed to just running around blasting heads. So that was something cool I noticed. Now the other 2 fights have a different thing going on. With the opening battle of Chapter 2, the agent opens the door to the Recreation Center lobby where he sees a group of D-Class battling some Foundation guards on opposite sides of the room. It's a pretty simple and fun setup, and you're thrown right in the middle of it. Do you try and stay down here by the door where you're safe but can't really see or shoot them and wait for them to kill each other off? Do you try and inch your way to the cover in the middle and try to hold out against both groups? Do you try and make a mad dash for one group and take them out as quickly as possible before sweeping up the rest? Which group do you choose? The D-boys are greater in number, but the Foundation fellas have some heavy riot guards on their side and they can take some hits. So many options with such basic effective arena design. Now let's look at the transport halls fight. In this battle, the agent enters a very dark, confined corridor where he fights against a group of guards who are waiting for him. But as he's busy with them, another group of guards opens a door behind him and catches him in the middle. Now the whole situation's been flipped on its head. The agent has to deal with enemies coming from both sides, and this time he's the one on the back foot. Another fun scenario where the power dynamic suddenly shifts and makes things exciting. But the problem is, none of these fights, the parking garage, the lobby, or the transport halls, actually work right now because the game just has no damn AI. To help me illustrate this, let's use Fear as an example here, since it is mathematically the greatest tactical FPS game ever made, and I'm very happy to say that the devs at Affray Interactive seem to be taking direct inspiration from it, considering it is the literal best game in existence to take inspiration from. Now in Fear, level design plays a very important role in gunfights because it's what enables the replica's AI to do all the crazy stuff they do, like moving furniture over for cover, breaching doors or walls, diving through windows, and all the other mythical stuff they're rightly praised for. Without at least some degree of proper level design, the AI of the replicas fails and has nothing to do with itself. So you need the two to work hand in hand so the game functions properly. The thing is though, while level design is important in Fear, a lot of people overstate just how important it is. I was watching one review where a guy said that the AI of the replicas isn't actually very good at all, and the level design, the verticality, the cover, etc. is what really makes the gunfight special. And then he says 10 minutes later that you can have an engaging fight in an environment as bland as a stairwell. So his point isn't completely wrong, the level design is important, but he basically said it himself, it's not precisely what makes Fear so legendary. It's also definitely the AI, it's all the nutty stuff the replicas can do that turns an environment as bland as a stairwell into a fun battle. Yes, the level design is important, but the AI is equally so, I would argue a bit more actually, and you can't have one without the other. Alright, so why am I saying all this? Well, because Area 12 directly supports my point and disproves the other guy's point about how it's all in the level design. It's not. These battles in 5K that all allow for multiple avenues of attack and have verticality and flanking routes to them and everything, they introduce enemies in a creative, engaging way, and even allow for a small degree of environmental interactivity, all don't work right now because the enemies have no AI. Yes, the level design of these battles is tremendous, but there's no enemy AI to actually make use of them. And really, all things considered, this isn't bad at all. Affray Interactive is really close here. I mean, let's break it down. They've got a decent player character, they've got cool ideas with the cars and the trucks, and they've got awesome level design. They have an understanding of how to make these gunfights engaging and tactical. In this sense, the game is doing exactly what it's supposed to do as an early access game in that regard, at least to me. I'm seeing clear signs here that Affray Interactive knows how to make this tactical shooter they're talking about. Everything is set up properly, and all that's left for them is to nail down a few final things. Give these guys some decent AI, and hell yeah, man, this game could very well be Fear with SCP monsters, and I don't say that lightly. But yeah, if you buy the game right now, all you're gonna get from Area 12 is a horde shooter with leaning. Now, some of you may be thinking, if the gameplay is this close in that regard, why am I not giving it an easy pass just like the story? Well, again, we still need some more perspective on that we'll be getting from aspects of the game outside of Area 12. We will return to discuss these issues further when I've laid out all the necessary information. Now it's finally time to wrap things up here with a quick ending section about some of Area 12's assorted intricacies I feel deserve mentioning. First off, co-op. Co-op is something I probably should have mentioned sooner. You may have noticed I was playing with a pal earlier in some clips, and overall my experience with co-op was pretty great. It's my opinion that aside from maybe some balancing issues, a game having co-op is never a bad thing, and that is definitely the case here. I don't recall any major latency or lag or connection drops either. Really not much else to be said other than co-op is great, and I give big points for any game that has it. What's even better, however, is that it's very much not a requirement. I mean, a good co-op horror game is really hard to do properly, especially if you're playing with goofy idiots who never take anything seriously, and if I want to actually be spooked, I prefer to play alone, so I'm happy to say that co-op is only there if you want it, which is exactly the way it should be. So again, big points for that. I think Affray's doing a great job here catering to both single and co-op players. Okay, secondly, we have bugs. Yes, there are an abundance of them. Ugly bugs, confusing bugs, obnoxious bugs, and more that I don't really need to get into because they are expected in early access games. But for what it's worth, in all my time playing, I have encountered absolutely no cyberpunk tier game-breaking technical bugs. There were never any times where like a keycard I needed didn't spawn, or a button I pressed didn't work, or I got stuck on terrain or something like that. There were times where events didn't really work, like the 173 screen intro thing broke for me, and sometimes doors would be opened already, but you should at least be able to play through all of Area 12 without ever having to reset or anything because of a bug, so there's no need to worry about that. Alright, next let's discuss environments. I already said that for basically all of Chapter 1, none of the environments are originality-wise all that impressive. Everybody's had a gunfight in a parking garage in a video game before. We've all crawled through vents and secret facilities and went through warehouses, you know the drill. But the way some of these environments are designed, like aesthetically, is different, and from what I've seen, I would describe Area 12 as having a very brutalist 70s look to it. It might sound strange, and I could be wrong, but it was very interesting to me as I explored Area 12 that the technology and fixtures and whatnot I saw actually kind of don't match up at all with the 2020 setting the level is supposed to be taking place in. Now, this isn't a criticism. That angle could definitely work, assuming that Area 12 was built a long time ago or something and still uses relatively archaic equipment, but I don't know, I just thought I'd point that out, and I'm really not sure what to make of it yet. To be honest, I kinda like it though. In addition, something else I noticed about Area 12 visually, and I'm also very unsure what to make of this as well, is that the place is torn up, right? There's a containment breach happening, monsters are running around everywhere, everybody's dead or missing, but what's strange to me is that the level of destruction here is not completely congruent with like what we see, you know what I mean? Again, this isn't inherently a criticism, just something I'm pointing out, but like resonators and zombies and a D-class riot can't result in devastation like this. I mean, it looks like bombs went off in here, or better yet, something absolutely massive came through the place. Sometimes you can even feel the ground shaking or see debris falling from the ceiling. It's pretty cool actually, and does a great job giving the sense that this place is far bigger than what we see, and also that it's really going to shit. And I'm excited at the thought of getting to see what actually caused all this. Also, kind of unrelated, but I just remembered to point out that fire extinguishers explode when you shoot them. Excellent, big points for that. Next, let's touch on atmosphere. There are undoubtedly some environments of Area 12 that are positively oozing with delicious, juicy, immersion. The fluorescent buzzing of the education center, the dark, cold, and creepy holding cells in the intro with an announcement repeating that there's been a major containment breach, and of course, absolutely anything with 1262. Now again, this also might not be a criticism, but one thing I noticed about Area 12's atmosphere, however, is that there is very little ambient music. 173 has a pretty spooky track that plays when you see him in the water treatment plant, and when you encounter 1262 in the dorms, there's a tremendous, perfectly otherworldly ambience that accompanies you throughout the area. But for about 80% of the level, all you're gonna get from the other areas are basic drones or maybe a few horror movie stings, and whether or not you prefer a bit of music with your atmosphere is ultimately up to you. But for the most part, I would say Area 12 does its atmosphere decently enough. Actually, coming back to the soundtrack, there is a little bit of combat music. There's some when you first encounter 3199, and I thought I remembered there being some during the gas valve fight, but when I played I didn't hear anything, so maybe the game bugged out, I don't know. But yeah, it's also very noticeably uncommon. The good news is, however, that there are some songs on the official Afray BoobTube channel, and they're pretty awesome. You can hear the UIU theme song in the background right now, and there are a few other really well done spooky tracks on there that do confuse me a little bit, since I'm not sure why they haven't made their way into the game yet, but they do also give me confidence that Afray does know how to make a good soundtrack. And that about does it for Area 12 right now, guys. Sorry if this video is already getting a bit long-winded, but yeah, that was Area 12, 3 years into SCP-5K's development. Again, don't for 1 second think I don't like this game or that I don't believe in it. I know I may have said a lot of polarizing shit in the past hour, but trust me, there will be a section at the end of the video where I tie everything back together. But for now, it's finally time for me to move on and discuss SCP-5K's extra game modes. Even in its early access state, SCP-5K offers a variety of additional game modes alongside its main ones. Those additional game modes being the Training Grounds, a testing map for player and weapon mechanics, the Raid on Outpost Axiom, a map that offers both PvP and PvE, the Old Storage Canals, a basic PvP deathmatch map, Horde Survival, a map set in a Foundation warehouse where Foundation guards must survive an onslaught of enemies, and finally, even a bare-bones little developer map that's been left in to allow players to experiment with the game's enemies. Not bad. Let's start with the Training Grounds. Now, in addition to discussing these extra game modes, I'd also like to use this section of the video to discuss other aspects of the game, such as its player factions, its graphics and optimization, and of course, finally, its weapons. Some of you have probably been waiting a while for me to talk about these things. The guns of SCP-5K have to be some of the best and most gunny guns I have ever used in a video game, period. The amount of effort and polish that went into every single aspect about them, their models, their sound design, their attachments, yes, their attachments that you are able to customize and edit at workbenches or in loadout menus if you choose, is nothing short of amazing and very noticeably impressive. To put into perspective just how crazy the guns in this game are, somebody made a YouTube video on the guns of SCP-5K before anybody made a video on like its actual SCPs or story or anything else. They're incredible. Okay, let's start with the ammo system. Here, I'll turn my HUD back on for this. Now, unlike in most games where the amount of ammo you have in a gun is just sort of a flat number and like the actual magazines you have aren't taken into consideration, ammo in SCP-5K is actually treated as though every bullet is stored in an actual magazine. So watch this. Look, I'll shoot 5 bullets from the 30-round magazine in my MP5. Now when he reloads, however, you'll notice in the bottom right the magazine he shot the 5 rounds from still has 5 rounds missing from it. So when he switches back to it, he'll still actually have only 25 rounds in it. Personally, I've never seen a system like this before, and it's one you'll definitely have to keep track of during combat so you don't accidentally put an almost empty magazine in your gun. Luckily for us the players, if you hold down the reload button button, your guy will take the magazine out and he'll have a look inside. And in the bottom right corner, if you're playing with the HUD, your ammo count will appear to show you what you've still got. It's just a really cool system, and it's amazing, frankly. It encourages you to save ammo and play carefully, but it's not like annoying and tedious like inventory management or anything. It's about as perfectly implemented as can be and does a great job at setting SCP-5K apart from other shooters as being that much more tactical and strategic. What is also just about perfectly implemented with the guns of SCP-5K are the first-person animations. Third-person animations can be a bit of a mixed bag, but the first-person ones most certainly are not. I mean, just look at how my guy moves the gun. His aiming isn't always perfectly 100% centered. Depending on what gun he's holding, a pistol, a rifle, an LMG, he'll actually move the gun differently depending on how heavy it is. But not only are they realistic and fun to watch, they're also fun and responsive to use. Leaning while aiming is usually pretty good. Most openings can be leaned through fairly comfortably. It does get a bit finicky sometimes with smaller openings, although that doesn't really happen with me enough for me to consider it all that frustrating. Reloading is handled especially well. Your guy can reload while he's performing basically any action, vaulting, jumping, and thank God, sprinting. Reload canceling is simply done with another press of the shoot button so long as the magazine hasn't left the gun during the animation. Attachments. This game has a whole customization system for each gun. Different sights, lasers, silencers, grips, weapon skins, canted sights. Oh yeah, by the way, the guy can cant the gun if you put different scopes on it. He can do braced aiming and kind of shoot from the hip, I guess. The guns make different sounds when you shoot them depending on how close to the end of the magazine you are. The reload animation changes if you actually empty the magazine fully. I mean, I can just go on and on about every little detail. I'm not even like a gun nut in the slightest for real life or video game guns. I just like to aim and shoot at stuff, and if a gun in a video game can do that for me well enough, that's fine. But the guns in 5K really take it to the next level. The passion and effort that went into making them as great as can be is felt every second you're holding them. My only feedback for the devs regarding the guns of the game is don't stop. However, the only weapons in 5K that cause any issues are the grenades. They are completely busted. They go through walls, they go through the floor, sometimes they bounce really weird. They need some work, but that's okay since we've got plenty of guns to play with in the meantime. Alright, so I'll leave it at that for the guns. We will return to discuss the big one when we get to the Discover program, but for now, let's move on from the training grounds. Next up, we have the PvP map, the Old Storage Canal. It seems alright. It's a big kind of Fear 1-esque PvP map that you can grab some friends to fight in, I guess. Not much else to be said about it since I can't really use it, unfortunately. Yeah, next we have the developer map, which is very similar to the training grounds. You can spawn enemies here as well and test out any gun you want in a big sandbox environment. Now, another very nice aspect, one of my personal favorites that I'll mention here while we're in the developer map, are SCP-5K's cheat codes. With a simple press of the / key, you'll be able to input a whole slew of helpful commands that Affray Interactive were very nice to leave in the game for us. You can no-clip as well by pressing the Shift key and J simultaneously, and there are even some little photo mode options down at the bottom if you want to take some cool shots or get some nice footage. Not all of the commands work 100% of the time. For example, I can never seem to be able to spawn any enemies, but still, thank you very much for these devs. Not only are cheats helpful for getting you out of any kind of early access jam should you find yourself in one, they also make it much easier for me as a boob tuber to create my videos by letting me fly around to places, turn God mode on to get past areas easier, and just check behind the curtain so I can learn more about the game. Alright then, now let's move on to Outpost Axiom, a rather interesting map where Foundation soldiers have set up shop in an abandoned industrial complex for some reason, and also gives me an opportunity to discuss this game's factions a bit more. Okay, so on the one side we have the evil, emotionless SCP Foundation who are hostile to any and all living things that cross their path, right? And on the other hand we have the UIU, basic guys trying to take paychecks home to the wives and kids and save the world at the same time. Pretty regular deal. However, in the SCP setting there is another major faction, and within the story of SCP-5000 this faction opposes the Foundation's goal to wipe out all of humanity, and its name is none other than the United Nations Global Occult Coalition, or GOC for short, which SCP-5K has officially made my second favorite fictional military faction of all time. The central idea behind the GOC as a faction is that they're kind of the opposite of the SCP Foundation. While the Foundation views themselves as untouchable, omniscient gods of all creation who are the only ones that deserve the final say on what happens to anomalies and everything, the GOC prioritizes human survival above everything else. When they encounter an anomaly, they'll just destroy it. They never try to contain or experiment on it or use it in any way, since their overarching goal is to wipe out any potential threat to the human race. This is best exemplified with the SCP-1261 article, a very interesting and concise Foundation report of a GOC raid on a secluded village in Peru where denizens of the village were experiencing anomalous circumstances surrounding strange invisible birds. The people of the village were able to perceive friendly flightless birds that followed them around and acted just like a regular house pet would, but nobody else besides them could see or interact with these birds, so they were just otherwise completely harmless anomalies that I guess the Foundation only decided to monitor since they were kind of self-contained already. However, it would seem the GOC caught wind of what was going on and staged a raid, and when the Foundation arrived later to investigate, the village's few hundred occupants were nowhere to be found. And many readers in the community interpret this ending of the article as suggesting the GOC killed them all just to get rid of the birds, because remember, the GOC tolerates no anomalies, safe or harmful. However, nowhere is it explicitly said in this article that the GOC murdered every single one of the residents. The subtext is there if you want to interpret it that way, but as we'll soon learn, the GOC has many other ways of making things disappear. Now, unlike the UIU, who are just dumb old underfunded feds, the GOC is a global organization with manpower nearly matching even that of the Foundation itself, and some of the most advanced technology in the setting. Remember when I told you earlier about their submersible supercarriers? But that's not all. See, remember, the GOC doesn't like anomalies, but what they are perfectly fine with and actually use quite often in their operations is magic. Harry Potter with a blue Antichrist helmet shooting an AR-15. That is the GOC, and the way they've been brought into this game is seamless. In SCP-5K, the UNGOC are somehow both formidable, respected, and imposing elite soldiers, and also kooky religious military wizards at the same time. I can't talk about them too much here because they do get their own mission later that I will use to get much more in depth with them, but I just need to introduce them here because you are allowed to play as them or the UIU in Outpost Axiom if you choose. See, in SCP-5K, the rest of the world all understands that the SCP Foundation is extremely powerful. If it did choose to pull something, it may very well be able to kill a lot of people, as was shown in the original story of SCP-5000. However, before the events of the game, the other organizations, the UIU, the UNGOC, and at least 20 other groups have signed a treaty to align with one another in the event the Foundation starts any shit, and this treaty outlines a set of directives called the Fault Line Protocols created to keep the Foundation's power in check. In SCP-5K, the writing on the wall with the Foundation's plans to destroy the world has been noticed, and all the members of the Fault Line Treaty have now aligned to fight the Foundation and keep them from killing humanity, and thus throughout SCP-5K we will see them working alongside one another. And with all that background info given, we can now start on Outpost Axiom itself. There's not really any story for me to get into, it's really just another testing map where the Foundation's decided to hole up in an old abandoned refinery in the middle of nowhere for some reason. And in the PvE mode, the level's gameplay consists of fighting droves upon droves of the same very dumb guards that weren't any fun in Area 12, and of course they aren't any more interesting here. The objectives are pretty basic as well. You go press a button and wait for a hack to finish, grab some folders, press a button again and wait for a decryption to finish, you stand in a warehouse for a minute, then you climb a satellite that hasn't even been fully modeled or textured yet, and then you press a button. Right now the level is totally butt cheeks, but again, just as with Area 12, some decent AI could very well make it a bit more engaging. What I like most about Outpost Axiom, however, is actually the map itself, which presents me an opportunity to try my best to cover this game's graphics, optimization, and performance. I think it's fair to say that Afraid is making great use of Unreal Engine 4's capabilities, and while they may not be pushing it to its absolute limit, the shadows can be a bit off occasionally. The interior and exterior lighting of Outpost Axiom looks fine to me. All the models are pretty detailed, textures are high resolution and hold up well to scrutiny, but most importantly, the environment is full of detail. There's papers all over the floor everywhere, dust particles floating in the light, and not a single room feels like it has anything missing. This is different from Area 12, where there are a number of areas you'd walk through that are clearly unfinished and lacking detail to the point where they don't look good. Now that's not to say that the game's overall shadows and lighting or stuff are bad, since they can still make relatively basic rooms without a ton of props still look pretty decent, but it's not great to the point where it can carry 4 walls entirely on its own. You know what I mean? Like this little hallway here clearly needs more detail. It needs like molding on the walls, or maybe some debris, some trash, something to make it not feel so flat. Yeah, sorry if that doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm not great with this graphic stuff. Let's just move on to optimization. Alright, now listen, I'll be honest, I'm not going to be able to give a super technical analysis here. All I'm going to tell you is that I have an RTX 4060 graphics card and a Ryzen 5 5600X CPU. I cap all my games at 60 FPS because I'm perfectly fine with that and don't believe my eyeballs can even register a frame rate any higher than that anyway, and I'm a simple man. I rate a game's performance on how loud the fans in my computer are when I'm playing it, and when I play SCP-5K on ultra settings, my computer sounds like this. Again, I'm not coming from a place that's 100% informed on everything there is to know about video game optimization and graphics and performance and all that, but even on ultra settings, the game definitely looks good, but you know, I don't think it's necessarily splitting the atom here graphics-wise, so I'm not sure it should be heating my computer up as much as it does. But what's most bizarre to me is that by some Unreal Engine black magic, it seems the most difficult part of this game for my computer to process and render is not actually hectic gunfights or complex effects. Instead, the loudest my computer gets while running SCP-5K is when I'm on the main menu screen. I don't even know how that's possible, frankly, but I was able to find a pretty easy fix. I simply changed the graphics preset from Ultra to High. The already subpar shadows took a hit, but I still had about the same level of detail in the environments and everything else, and now my computer doesn't sound like a jumbo jet. Yeah, it's really all in the presets. From what I can tell, there aren't a ton of graphical settings that the game offers, and the low and medium presets, well, look like this. So you've basically got High and Ultra to choose from, and you can't really do a ton of fancy settings editing to optimize the game yourself. Also, other things like stuttering and lag and whatnot, from what I can tell, don't really seem to be tied to the game's graphics at all, and are present across all presets from my experience. Yeah, that's all I can say about the game's graphics department. Probably not as thorough an analysis as it could have been, but I tried and was honest about it. In addition, this might be kind of related, this game already has a pretty big file size, 45.9 gigabytes while still in early access, which to put into perspective is 14 gigabytes larger than Trepang Squared with its DLCs included, so make of that what you will. By the way, there's also a PvP mode for Outpost Axiom, but other than that, I don't really have anything else to say about it, so let's move on to the final extra game mode, Horde Survival, which sees the player take control of a Foundation guard who fights against hordes of enemies. Now the guard controls the exact same as the agent and the GOC operative, same running speed, health, NVGs, etc, and when he starts out all he has is a pistol, but as he survives rounds he is awarded with new guns that will magically appear around the map, and he can also customize his weapons at a workbench. There is no currency system or guns that can be unlocked. Rounds mostly consist of dozens of zombies running after you to kill you, and ammo and health pickups spawn only in this one area by the railings, and that's about it. There are sometimes some D-class that shuffle out for a few rounds, which on paper sounds kind of interesting, spicing up the horde gameplay with some actual human enemies on occasion, but since they still have the same dookie AI they have at Area 12 that is once again no better here, they're nothing noteworthy. And speaking of not being noteworthy, the horde survival game mode in general is overall very hard to enjoy. Maybe it wouldn't have been as miserable if I was playing with other people, but this game mode is everything bad about horde shooters condensed into one experience. All you do is lead the single most boring video game enemies in existence, zombies, around this gigantic basic map and occasionally pick off one or two of them as you run before jumping over a railing and starting all over again. And it isn't helped by the fact that all the resources are kept in this one tiny area at the start. In Area 12, I actually never really felt that the agent was too slow to handle all the zombies and enemies that were thrown at him because the environments had a lot of props and other obstacles you could use to your advantage, and not to mention there weren't nearly as many enemies. But here it's made painfully obvious that the player characters are actually only just barely able to outrun these zombies, and you can clearly see just how hard the tactical gameplay mechanics of realistically controlled soldier guys clashes with the horde shooter mechanics of armies of enemies being thrown all at once at one person. To make matters worse, remember how the only thing I praised about the zombies earlier in Area 12 was that they sometimes stay alive and get back up after you shoot them? Well, they also do that here in Horde Survival, but here, after you've killed nearly all of the zombies and you've led the horde all around the map, there will almost always be at least one zombie you killed 2 minutes ago all the way at the beginning of the map who got back up. Okay, not that big of a deal, right? Just backtrack to where you were before and go kill them again, right? No, because when a zombie gets back up, it'll start wandering around looking for you again, and oftentimes they'll be nowhere near where you actually killed them. They'll be stuck in a doorway somewhere, so I must have spent at least 10 minutes of my 16-round run just looking around for where the last damn zombie was between rounds. I even had to no-clip a few times to go find him. Overall, it offers absolutely nothing that you can't get from a few rounds of 5, does nothing whatsoever to further the store description of SCP-5K as a tactical horror shooter, since it has neither tactical mechanics or any horror to it, and there's no real point in me spending much time on it since clearly the devs didn't. But, and this is an important but, I'm actually not really bothered by it because Horde Survival is an extra game mode. It's just something the devs whipped up in a jiffy and threw in for anyone who's interested. It's totally inoffensive, and since I don't like it and it doesn't hold my attention, I don't have to play it and still have the entire rest of the game to enjoy. I can take comfort in the fact that this kind of tedious and unenjoyable gameplay loop isn't going to be the standard for the rest of the game, and with each update the devs will be steadily moving away from it. Which is what I would have liked to say, but then we got to the Discover program. Added in Update 0.17 on August 20th of 2025, the Discover program is yet another game mode that is not necessarily a part of the central narrative of SCP-5K. Instead, the Discover program puts the player in the shoes of the D-Class personnel, the lowest ranking members of the SCP Foundation whose survival skills are being put to the test in a new scientific initiative. Yes, we get to play as the D-Boys, and even though they're boring old silent protagonists, just like the agent is, at least now I finally get to discuss what I consider to be one of the strongest things this game has going for it, its art direction. The D-Class prisoner outfit is I don't even know where to begin. I mean, every time new inmates show up to Area 12, the Foundation researchers probably tell them, okay, listen guys, we are gonna experiment on and kill the shit out of you here, but the good news is you're gonna be dressed to the nines while you die. I'd fucking rob a bank in China and get sentenced to death if it meant I got a chance of wearing that fit. But they don't just look cool. Afray Interactive designed these outfits in a way that serves a purpose. See, the D-Class prisoner jumpsuit doesn't only serve as clothing for the wearer, but also as his body bag. See all the clips and straps and loops on this guy? That's so when he dies, the other D-Boys he's with can just zip him up and take him off to the crematory. But before they do do that, they need to be sure to open the spigot on the heel of his boots to drain his blood. Another impossibly gnarly design aspect that the art director for Affray Interactive, Kyle Fitzpatrick, says he got from a yogurt lid. I'm just gonna say it, the design of the D-Class might be the single most amazing character design I've ever seen in a video game, period, and let me tell you why. It's because it's a fresh, unsaturated archetype. Listen, you could spend hours and hours trying to come up with the dopest, most functional, most coolest looking knight design ever, and somebody could always just say, it's just a knight. Same goes for like the coolest soldier design ever, and that goes for all the different denominations of soldier designs too. Future soldiers, old soldiers, modern soldiers. You're always just gonna hit a ceiling because even if it's a superhuman, religious zealot, space fascist, adult child soldier like this ultramarine here, your dad would just look at him and say, hey, cool space soldier. Now, if you show the D-Class from SCP-5K to your dad, he's gonna be like, what the f is that guy? You know, nobody's just gonna mentally file it away as like a soldier or a knight. A prisoner design is something new. Affray Interactive took what is an incredibly underappreciated character design avenue, what a prisoner could look like in a fictional setting, and instead of phoning it in with a basic realistic design, since realistic doesn't always equal good, they chose to create something truly fucking gnarly, and you'll notice that there are even variations of the D-Class uniform. The D-Class serve many functions in the Foundation's operations, and they can be found not just with basic hoods that are meant to dehumanize them, but also with helmets, hazmat gear, headsets, respirators, and welding masks. They even have different colored uniforms too. Standard Workman D-Class wear a cool mix of orange and black, Science Team D-Class units that are used in laboratory environments wear these teal and white uniforms, and then there are these rarely seen red D-Class units that are referred to in the game files as the Dead Men, which I would assume implies they must be the absolute least valuable D-Class units there are and are used in the most dangerous scenarios. So in summary, Affray absolutely murdered it with this nightmarish utilitarian D-Class design. They are literally wearing their own coffins, and they even have their own unique version of the agent's wristwatch. It's this Fitbit looking thing, and when I extracted the model of it to get a better look, I noticed there's prongs in it that get jammed into the prisoner's wrist so the device can monitor his heart rate. I just have absolutely nothing but good things to say about their appearance, and we'll come back to character design and art direction later when I talk about the GOC, but now it's time for the Discover program itself. Once again, the Discover program features ever so wonderful and entirely optional full cooperative play. You'll notice in some clips I'll be with a guy named Hazmat Harold, and credit where it's due, the Discover program is probably the single most polished game mode when it came to co-op. We did crash one single time when we first played, like 2 days after the update came out, but other than that there was no other major lag or any other crashes or anything else besides it, so once again I give major points for co-op. With that being said, let's try and jump in. The Discover program opens with the player character, who I will now refer to from this point on as the prisoner, exiting an elevator into the Discover program's hub world, the testing terminal, a nexus for D-Class participating in the Discover program experiments where you can get a few minutes to rest between tests and stock up on weapons and ammo, eat nanners to regenerate health, answer bizarre survey questions that unfortunately don't really affect anything, check the leaderboards, and chill with the homies while you wait for the next test to start. At the end of each chamber, the prisoner is sent back up here to restock and start all over again. The terminal is also where the prisoner can watch the Discover program orientation, a 5.5 minute long video playing on one of those old rolling TVs they used in my elementary school whenever the teacher wanted to take a break and just show us a documentary. The video itself is corrupted and scratchy, almost like it's been possessed by something, and flashes of creepy imagery and text show up throughout it for like 4 frames each, so you can't even see what it is. And I'll be fucking damned if I'm slowing down the footage and going back to read that shit, so whatever it was, it better not have been interesting because that's a terrible way to deliver lore. Anyway, this video actually serves as the tutorial of the Discover program, and while I would definitely understand if some players didn't want to sit around for 5 minutes and would instead prefer all that information to be conveyed through the gameplay, lucky for them, it really is for the most part, so I find the tutorial video is mostly inoffensive since you can watch it or skip it and still be able to play just fine. Alright, so what's the actual content of the video? Well, as it should, it explains the core mechanics of the game mode and also serves as what I feel is one of the two tonal cornerstones of the Discover program. The orientation video has this very bubbly teacher-sounding lady narrating it, and the way she talks is very simplified and rather patronizing, as if she's talking to children. And you'll notice right next to the TV is the other tonal cornerstone of the Discover program, Arlie 12. Arlie 12 is the official mascot of the Discover program, an adorable cartoon of a banana-eating Rang wearing a D-class jumpsuit who can be found and heard throughout its 10 chambers, giving tips to the prisoner as he navigates each test. He's naive, he calls you his testing buddy, and he's also a patronizing asshole that gives monkeys everywhere a bad name. And you'll notice as well these propaganda posters around the terminal with equally incongruent messages. Anybody noticing the theme here yet? Yeah, the Discover program has that horror game juxtaposition thing going on, where it's like, welcome to the torture pits. We hope you enjoy your stay. You know what I mean? I don't know if there's a term for it, but I've illustrated what I'm trying to refer to here. You know what I'm talking about, and it's not even exclusive to just horror games. This kind of dissonance is in like every game ever. The Foundation is clearly trying to sanitize and soften the atrocities happening here by infantilizing the D-class, and while I find this whole juxtaposition thing is definitely starting to run its course, it does serve a real purpose here, and some of these posters are pretty awesome. My favorite's gotta be the gun safety sign where it says bullets are for anomalies and D-class only, not people. Kinda makes me wish Afray leaned more into the dehumanization aspect of the D-class instead of this infantilization angle, but regardless, enough talk about the tone. What exactly is the story of the Discover program? Well, there isn't one. The prisoner is a silent protagonist who only makes noise when he's coughing from breathing in toxic gas, and there is no real plot that can be extracted. No lore documents, no characters, no actual objective beyond just survival, but what we do get is some really juicy subtext from an absolute truckload of environmental storytelling. The Discover program took place in 2018, 2 years before the events of Area 12, and consists of 10 different testing chambers that are experienced one after the other in a linear fashion. All these chambers are set up to somewhat resemble real-world environments, and the prisoner and his pals are shoved through these gauntlets where they're pitted against the SCPs of Area 12. The Foundation is running experiments to see how the people of Earth might act in the upcoming war against them and their SCPs. I gotta be honest, that's a really cool premise, and the game mode is just packed with tons of little details. There's this announcer guy that says something every time the prisoner gets on the elevator. Most of the time he's just explaining how to do stuff, but sometimes he makes a joke or even a little reference to the original SCP-5000 story itself. And at the start of each chamber, Arlie will ask the prisoner very particular questions. With the house chamber, he'll ask the prisoner if he feels more motivation to survive and defend the homestead. With the bunker chamber, he asks the prisoner if he feels stronger and more willing to cooperate with his fellow D-class. In the winter chamber, he asks the prisoner if he feels himself slowing down from the cold, and in the theater chamber, he'll ask the prisoner if he's enjoying the show. Just a lot of little hints that the Foundation is trying to gather data on how the upcoming war might go. Cool stuff. By far the best lore tidbits the Discover program offers, however, comes from the D-class themselves. The D-class here are losing their goddamn minds. All throughout the terminal, you'll find their insane rambling scrawled everywhere, and there even seems to be some kind of prejudicial tribalism that's been formed between the different denominations. The dead men, the red D-class guys, leave messages on their seats for the orange-colored workmen, letting them know they don't want them on their turf. And the workmen leave little orange post-it notes for the dead men telling them that they suck. The D-class even have a slur for their captors too. They call them foundies. This stuff is great, but I gotta say it's really a shame we don't get any of that from the actual D-class we get to play as. There's a ton of opportunity here for some simple dope character stuff, but all we get is another boring old blank slate who never says anything. He does have some pretty funny animations for some of the weird items though. Regardless, that's all I can say for the Discover program story here. Everything else I didn't mention is just basic tidbits, at least until we get to Chamber 10, which has something completely different going on. But now it's time for gameplay. What do we actually do in the Discover program? It's a horde shooter. A wave survival horde shooter. against the very same rudimentary, mind-numbingly boring enemies that weren't any fun in Area 12 or the classic wave survival mode. Matter of fact, some of them may be even worse here. There is only one new enemy, SCP-1114, whose article on the SCP website explains that they are automotive frontal impact crash test dummies with fascinating anomalous properties. When a human being within 50 meters of one of these dummies is injured, the dummy will reshape the plating on its face to resemble that of the injured humans. And if it receives any form of damage while it's imprinted on the human like this, the damage will transfer to the human, but if the human receives damage, the damage will go to the dummy while the human only feels the pain. In one of the experiment logs, it's explained that Foundation security strapped the D-Class down into a chair while a researcher jammed a needle into his leg to cause a small injury. When the SCP-1114 dummy being tested changed its face to match the D-Class's, a Foundation security member hit the D-Class on the head with his baton, and even though the D-Class felt extreme pain from it, no actual injury was present on his head, while a large dent had formed on the dummy. In another experiment log, they strapped a different D-Class down to the chair, hurt him with a needle, and once again the dummy being tested changed its face. But this time, instead of just hitting him with a baton, a Foundation security guard was instructed by the researchers to fire his weapon at the head of the dummy. But upon doing so, one of the researchers in the room suddenly had his head blasted open and he died on the spot, since remember, if you damage an imprinted dummy, the human it's imprinted on will receive the damage instead of it. Here, it seems as though the doctor had somehow hurt himself somewhere along the line and nobody realized that it was actually his face the dummy had morphed to form, resulting in his accidental death. So SCP-1114 sounds really awesome, right? It could make for a wild enemy, so what are they like in-game? Well, they make laughing noises a lot for some reason, like they're creepy clowns or something, and very disappointingly, they don't do any of that face reshaping stuff. They all just have this same doofy looking smile. Their stupid appearance is made even worse by the fact that there's concept art of them where their faces are like smashed in. It'd be way more unsettling seeing that thing coming towards you, and it'd be better yet if it was completely silent or only made like rickety mannequin sounds instead of a generic spooky laugh. They also don't have any cool damage transfer mechanics whatsoever like in the article, and as you can see, their AI is complete garbage. I gotta ask, what is this walking thing that the enemies in this game do? It's so bizarre. They don't move with any purpose. Is it some kind of way to balance enemies with the slow movement of the player characters? Because it doesn't do that. It just looks really weird and it makes them extremely sluggish and easy to kill. What I guess I can praise about the dummies is the detachment system they have, since it does seem the devs put a decent bit of thought and effort into it. See, they're able to withstand a lot of damage to their torso, but when you shoot at their arms, you can blast them off, and if you shoot off both arms, they'll actually run toward you and try to smack you with their heads. Neat. If you shoot a leg off though, they just die. They don't crawl towards you or anything like that. They also come in separate colors, which are supposed to be different from one another, but I didn't register any notable difference. Look, I can definitely respect and appreciate that they didn't just want to use the guards again here for the Discover program, but dude, they have no AI. These enemies need AI, man. Actual proper enemy behavior. You can dress them up in all the novelty you want, but this AI is not cutting it, and these enemies are not fun to fight. And speaking of unfun enemies, the vast majority of foes we face off against in the Discover program are, you guessed it, zombies. But don't worry, we also have broken monster crabs, frustratingly spongy resonators, hilariously terrible chickens, and the occasional SCP-610 instance, which is an SCP that was not introduced in the Discover program update, and I will be explaining them later when I talk about Ghosts of the South Gate, so just ignore them for now. Alright, great, so the enemies suck. Let's move on to the weapons. Over by the elevator in the terminal, there is a selection of 6 different weapons, 2 pistols and 4 primaries, all covered in black and yellow paint with no attachments on them. We've got a 1911, a 369J revolver, a Strybog, an MP9, a sawed-off Mossberg, and an M24. The prisoner can only hold 2 weapons, 1 primary and 1 sidearm. There are no workbenches to customize them anywhere in the Discover program, there's no shooting range to test them or anything, and there are no other weapons that can be purchased or found anywhere else in the entirety of the game mode. 6 weapons, 2 of them sidearms. That's all you get get to choose from, and these don't change at any point after any round. It's the same 6 weapons on these racks all the way through. Alright, but we'll come back to the weapons in a bit. Before you start each chamber, the first thing you need to do before you forget is come over to this button here and accept the chamber challenge. Chamber challenges are optional trials that the prisoner can complete while he's playing through a chamber to earn additional credits. More on those in just a second, and each challenge is specifically tied to a chamber. They aren't randomized. They vary vastly in quality and difficulty, and each one is vital to a chamber's overall enjoyment. Most of them require you to stay in a certain part of the map for the duration of the chamber, while others are a little better and ask you to do more interesting things during combat, while others are confusing and others are downright impossible to beat fully. But the main issue with these primary challenges is that they are absolutely required to earn any sufficient number of credits, which function as the Discover program's currency system. More on that in just a second. You're also given one single optional challenge alongside the chamber challenge, which also have varying degrees of difficulty, and I'm not even sure they're randomized either, but they also offer a small number of credits upon completion if you're able to do them. Challenges are definitely not handled as well as they should have been. They are not risky bets or gambles. You need to do them as much as you can. You don't get any credits for simply beating a chamber, so if you forget to accept the challenge in the terminal, you're basically just out a few credits. There's no benefit to not doing them. They should just be automatically given for each chamber. Also, you can lose credits. I don't know how, but sometimes while I was playing, I would randomly just lose a credit at the end of a round. I don't know if it's from a challenge I failed or what, but yeah, that's wonderful. So what do you do with these? Well, around each chamber are these supply boxes that can be opened for a couple of credits. Pretty helpful if you run out of the supplies that are already provided in the chamber you're in, but the main function that credits serve is to allow you to use SCP-914. SCP-914 is the only other SCP added in the Discover program besides SCP-1114, and its article on the SCP website explains that it's a massive and incredibly complex clockwork device with 2 ports on either side of it, one labeled intake and the other labeled output. Between the ports is a dial with 5 settings: rough, coarse, 1-to-1, fine, and very fine. One of the experiment logs reads that when SCP-914 was given a kilogram of steel and activated on the rough setting, it outputted a pile of steel chunks. Another log reads that when it was given a researcher's wristwatch and activated on the coarse setting, it outputted the same wristwatch but completely disassembled. When given a cell phone and activated on the 1-to-1 setting, it outputted another cell phone with a completely different make and model. And when given another kilogram of steel and activated on the fine setting, it outputted 1 kilogram of steel carpet tacks. When given a 28-year-old male human being and set to the very fine setting, it outputted a superhuman monster that attacked security guards, killed a researcher, and broke 3 other SCPs out of containment before it died. After that, they never tested on it again with a living thing. Alright, so another really sick SCP article, and I'm happy to say that SCP-914's appearance in-game definitely lives up to its original description. It just looks so perfectly baffling and very fittingly complicated, and I especially love the way it seems to just go on forever beyond all the gears and piping. But how does it actually function in-game? Well, in the Discover program, it's the SCP equivalent to the Call of Duty Zombies mystery box. At the end of each chamber, you're allowed to use it before you head back into the terminal, and if you're playing co-op, each prisoner gets their own 914 so nobody's currency gets messed with. Basically, it takes your gun and gives you something else, but there are a few extra intricacies involved with it. Unfortunately for us, how SCP-914 itself actually functions is never really explained properly, which I guess makes sense because it is anomalous and logic-defying and nobody understands how it works, not even the researchers, much less the D-Class. Although it is charming, however, that one of the other D-Class tried to scrawl how he thought 914 works on the floor for his fellow prisoners. And that's about it. Visit 914 at the end of each chamber and test your luck to see what it gives you. Pretty interesting way to bring the SCP into the game, and everyone in the community, including myself, seems to have unanimously agreed it's probably the coolest thing to actually come out of the Discover program. Which is very emblematic of the Discover program itself because 914 still has plenty of issues. Number 1, SCP-914 is the only way to get new guns in the Discover program. You know how in COD Zombies there are tons of other guns around the level that you can buy if you're luck isn't great and the mystery box is acting up? Okay, well here, there aren't any of them. If 914 eats all your credits and gives you complete garbage, which it very will often do, guess what? You're still stuck with the 4 primaries and 2 secondaries, and now you have to work to get all your credits back from these confusing challenges that barely give you any credits to begin with. But that's not even the worst part. The very fine setting, which if you remember from the article is the most batshit off the wall one, is basically the only way to get anything decent out of this thing, but it costs a ridiculous 15 credits, which is at the very least 3 rounds of saving and completing challenges, and once again there is a very non-zero chance of it giving you shit anyway. Yeah, the other 4 settings are no greater than 2 credits each, but those settings more often than not just give you crap, maybe a Draco or a pistol if you're lucky, so the only way you have a chance at getting a decent cool gun is to try and save for 15 credits, set the dial to very fine, ignore the pressure gauge, and hope for the best. So if you blow all 15 credits on it and it gives you a ballpoint pen, it's 3 more rounds of saving, and by the time you'll have saved up enough to try again, you're probably already at least at chamber 5. So effectively, you have to wait until halfway through the game mode before you even get a chance at getting the thing to work. It wouldn't be so bad if there were other guns to use besides the 6 you get in the terminal, but that's really all there is. Frankly, maybe 914 should have been more puzzle-based instead of chance-based or something. Perhaps then it wouldn't feel as disheartening not being able to get new guns, since it would at least partly be on you. I don't know. And before anyone tells me I'm not using 914 properly, dude, in the devlog video for 0.17, a phrase says they intentionally made 914 hard to understand to add to its esoteric nature, which would be totally fine, but with the way it's handled here and how there's no other guns to fall back on besides the 4 crappy primaries, it stops being a cool, mysterious SCP and starts being really frustrating because the entire weapon economy of the game is stuck in this thing they intentionally designed to be impossible to understand. And that's basically it. That's the weapons situation of the Discover program. You barely get to experience any of this game's massive arsenal of awesome weaponry. You don't get to customize anything. You get these 4 very rudimentary guns that not only get old fast, but also probably won't even be able to take care of you in the later rounds, and a very expensive mystery box. However, there is one new gun added in the 0.17 update that almost makes all that shit with 914 worth it, and it's the GM6 Bloodhound. The GM6 Bloodhound is the single most unique weapon in SCP-5K. It contains the essence of 2 different SCPs, SCP-939 and SCP-334, and somehow combines them with the prisoner's blood to shoot it back out of the GM6 Link's platform it uses as an extremely powerful projectile. Or maybe it actually sucks blood from other enemies into it, or both? I'm not 100% sure how it works. There's no info on it in the game yet besides its name, but I do know how to use it, and it is absolutely gnarly and powerful. If you can get it from 914, it's the equivalent of getting the ray gun in COD Zombies. When the prisoner reloads it, he pricks his hand on the needles on the handle of the gun, and each time he does it, it drains his health but refills the Bloodhound's ammo. And the design of the thing is tremendous. Not only does it look sick, it's great because during gameplay you can see how much blood/ammo you have in the tanks on the right. And the heart rate monitor on the prisoner's wrist that lets you see his health just makes for tremendous integrated UI. What's interesting as well is that it seems to be fittingly hazardous to use. If you shoot it too quickly, it'll start going haywire and draining the prisoner's health. And if his health gets too low, he'll actually drop it. He'll never actually kill himself with it, which is a pretty cool detail. Just goes to show too that it's not some ordinary gun. The prisoner's holding in his hands something truly anomalous and dangerous, and I hope we get to see more weapons like it. Overall, it's an absolute blast to use. It's got a sick design, stopping power, great feedback, and having to keep an eye on your health while using it adds another awesome layer of depth to its gameplay. There's just one issue. The only way to get the Bloodhound is through this thing, so if you actually want to use it, Good luck. Anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on 914 and the guns of the Discover program. Now, I'm only speaking for myself. I know 914 is luck-based, so I'm sure some people got bloodhounds or LMGs after round 1 and will disagree. But all I can tell you is what I experienced, and frankly, I find the way the weapons are handled in the Discover program to be pretty bad. Alright, so with what we now know about the awful enemies and the disappointing weapons, what is the actual experience of the Discover program itself? Let's take it chamber by chamber. Chamber 1 is a small arena made out to look like a nighttime forest with a campfire in the middle of it. Its chamber challenge, which remember you basically have to do since challenges are the only way to get credits, is to stay in a small cabin in the corner of the map and hold out there until the round ends. So you're restricted to camping in this one area here the whole round, which completely removes like the whole improvisation mechanic of a horde shooter where you can run around and kite the enemies. Chamber 2 is a kind of weird wooden structure in what's some kind of jungle setting, and it does actually improve things a small amount. The chamber challenge here is to blast the limbs and heads off the SCP-1114 dummies, so you're able to move around the map as you please. And moving around the map here is okay. There's some clear thought put into the level design, and now that I actually have a few ways to avoid the horde with jumps and stairwells, I'm able to properly kite them as best I can with the prisoner's clunky, realistic momentum-based movement that's made for a tactical shooter and not a horde shooter. Chamber 3 is made to resemble a large house and takes a bit of a step backwards. This time the chamber challenge restricts you again to the upper floor of the house, where you simply funnel enemies up the stairwell on either side until the round ends. Chamber 4 is an environment made to resemble an industrial setting, and it's a pretty simple and small arena that has probably the absolute best level design in the game mode. There's gas on the lower levels, so watch your step, and there's also this elevated position you can use to snipe enemies from. But you can't sit up there forever since there's 2 stairwells on either side and it's easy to get overwhelmed. But if that happens, you can drop down and start a run around the walkways. Not only are there some boxes and whatnot around to slow the horde ever so slightly, there's this very helpful broken walkway section that enemies can only go over on one side. So you can use this gap here as a little kite reset, but you can't use it to cheese since you can only reset the horde once. Pretty good. The chamber challenge isn't that cool, just beat it before a time limit runs out or you die, but it's inoffensive, so whatever. Chamber 4 is ever so marginally better, I guess, and actually feels as though the level has been designed specifically to accommodate the prisoner's slow, clunky movement. Chamber 5 is a large bunker built in an environment that's been made to resemble a war zone, and the chamber challenge is pretty cool. If you accept it, explosions will erupt outside the bunker that mimic artillery shelling, so if you step outside, be careful. Fortunately for you, you'll never have to set foot out there. The bunker is expansive and intricate. Too intricate. Where the industrial arena in Chamber 4 with the walkways was designed nice and tight, the bunker is far too large for both you, the player, and the enemy AI. The already dookie enemy AI will have a lot of trouble actually getting to you in this place, and whenever I played, I spent most of my time looking for enemies instead of running from them. Chamber 6 shows a brief glimmer of hope. It consists of 4 very small arenas that each feature weather from the 4 different seasons. At least that's what it says. And it's got the same inoffensive time limit challenge that Chamber 4 had. What's unique about this chamber, however, is that there are these broken pipes around the place with targets next to them that if shot will cause fire to spew from the pipes. It's nothing crazy, but it's pretty fun getting to use the environment like this in a fight and definitely elevates the gameplay a marginal amount. But it's not nearly enough to carry the weak gameplay loop, and I don't have anything else to say about it aside from why the hell is there this weird zombie penguin here on a computer. Chamber 7 is pretty goddamn lame. Even though it's cold and snowing, it has no effect on the prisoner at all, and the arena is just a basic walkway in the center with some dinky, useless structures scattered around the place. The chamber challenge here is equally lame. It says to not use the same weapon types, which is to say you have to use different guns like shotguns, LMGs, DMRs, etc. And it's essentially impossible to do solo because you can only carry 2 guns anyway, and even if you have other players with co-op, it's not really a challenge. It's It's just a check to see if you brought different guns to the chamber, because remember, there's no way to get new guns except at 914 or the 6 defaults, 2 of which are pairs of the same weapon type anyway. It's not that big of a deal, frankly, because if you bring 2 weapons, you're basically guaranteed at least a couple credits because you can't bring 2 of the same weapon type. You can only have a primary and a pistol, but still, it's a dumb challenge, and Chamber 7 is just cheeks overall. Chamber 8, however, is quite a bit different. The arena starts out as what appears to be a small mock set piece for a stage play, but once you kill enough zombies, you'll hear a guy yell "cut," and then the walls of the room will fall down, revealing a larger portion of the arena before he yells action again and more enemies come out. This goes on for a bit until the entirety of the arena is revealed, a large theater with 1114 dummies posed in strange positions all over the place. At first they're immobile, seemingly acting as lifeless puppets, but eventually when you turn your back to them they awaken and try to kill you. In addition, the chamber challenge is pretty simple. All you gotta do is shoot a few red targets, but it's made interesting by the chamber's circumstances, and it's suitably nerve-wracking searching for a target you can't see amidst the horde while you listen to its timer tick down. Overall, Chamber 8 is hectic, dynamic, and downright fun. It's wonderful. It's freaking hard, a very noticeable spike in difficulty from the previous chambers, but it is incredibly engaging fighting through the theater and trying to survive in all the chaos. Plus, it's a stupendously unique setting to make an arena out of, an old theater, and there are even these cool Easter egg posters around the place about SCP movie concepts. I'll be honest, while playing through Chamber 8, I forgot all that stuff about the weapons and the credits and whatnot, and I just had a good old cool experience. I don't have anything else to say about it other than I absolutely loved it. Chamber 9 isn't quite as dynamic, but my god, is it another awesome environment. The arena is this reality-defying aquarium with floating water, fish swimming through the air, and enormous models of magnificent blue whales hanging from the ceiling. The whole chamber is just beautiful and mesmerizing. I have no idea what exactly is going on or why it's happening, but that just means it fits right into the SCP universe. The gameplay of the chamber, however, isn't as spectacular, unfortunately. The chamber challenge is another area restriction challenge that forces you to just stay in the center of the arena and avoid the electrified water, and the level design itself is nothing extraordinary. Still though, the environment alone was definitely enough to absolutely carry the chamber in terms of my enjoyment, and I'm very much hoping we get to see more of this amazing broken reality concept. However, Chamber 10 is something else entirely. Before the prisoner is even sent to Chamber 10, when he approaches SCP-914 for the last time only to get a Pepsi can or a rock or some shit, you'll notice that the guard stationed above 914, who is usually alone, is now accompanied by another guard and a Foundation researcher in the flesh. You'll also notice that the door to the elevator that takes you back to the terminal is now closed as well, and the opposite door is now open instead. Heading through it, the prisoner is met with the Area 12 Ethics Department, staffed by a single guard who was kind enough to leave a banana out for the prisoner before he heads on to his final trial. However, when the prisoner steps into the elevator, he's taken not to one of the chambers, but instead a labyrinth of some kind. And upon pressing the button to start the test, Arlie 12 comes over the loudspeaker to give the most ominous introduction yet. Arlie tells the prisoner that he's never had parents, and that being a parent is a big responsibility that sometimes requires sacrifices, before asking the prisoner what kind of parent will he be and how far is he willing to go to protect his loved ones. Through the window above the button, a light shines on a stroller, and stepping over to it, the prisoner looks inside to see what is, thank God, not an actual human baby, but an adolescent instance of SCP-3199 being kept alive in a small incubation pod. A tube that was facilitating the incubation disconnects, and the final chamber sees the prisoner fight against the horde to bring the stroller to its destination along the railways. The gameplay has now shifted from wave survival to a payload objective. The prisoner needs to push this stroller with the adolescent 3199 in it before its incubation device runs out of power, and as he's doing so, he passes bizarre, inexplicable children's drawings on the walls and floors that seem to depict a woman or a girl being eaten by monsters. I'm not entirely sure about the person's age, since the drawings are clearly very crude, like a child's, but I also noticed that she's often drawn visibly larger than other characters and just looks more like an adult to me, but regardless, regardless. Other drawings of her show her eyes bleeding or standing amongst other smaller people, and there are other drawings where she's absent and instead depict illustrations of eyeballs, spiders, and these weird red dog things which the artist refers to as her friends. In addition, there are a few drawings of the D class, with some of them being very unsettlingly labeled with the word eat. It's a wild journey along the rails, and at one point it even takes the prisoner to an area where it looks like the roof is open to the outside world and the sun is shining in. God damn, the Foundation is ruthless in this game, letting him feel the freedom on his face even though he knows he's never making it out. But the best part, look who's back. 1262 makes a brief appearance again to hassle the prisoner on his trip up with the stroller. It isn't here for long, but it is certainly appreciated. I always like to see more of 1262. Eventually though, the prisoner arrives at a mock house, crudely painted and made to resemble a child's drawing of a home. There are more drawings around here, a morbid hopscotch court with a dead D-class laying on top of it, tic-tac-toe grids, and even bizarre depictions of weird spider-rabbit hybrid creatures. This is the prisoner and his child's home, and when he pushes the stroller inside the house, the shuttered door closes him out and he has to defend his homestead from the final onslaught of enemies. When he kills the last one, the shuttered door opens again and lets him inside into a small room with the strangest drawings yet. The most strange one being a drawing of the female figure next to some kind of red creature she's labeled her mommy with a heart next to the two. In other news, the adolescent 3199 the prisoner's been protecting this whole time has been placed on a platform in the center of the room with a symbol of a baby on it, and Foundation researchers watch closely from a viewing platform above the prisoner. Arlie comes over the radio again to say that the child and the prisoner have made it home safely, but maybe the prisoner is not what's best for the child. Arlie asks the prisoner, who will you put first? Press the button and remain at the expense of the child, or ignore the button and enter the fireplace to remove yourself for the child's benefit. If the prisoner kills the chicken, Arlie apathetically sings a lullaby as it's crushed to death, and the Discover program ends with Arlie telling the prisoner he hopes the experience of parenthood brought him a sense of joy and purpose. If the prisoner spares the chicken, he'll walk into an incinerator room and quickly burn to death, while Arlie congratulates him for putting himself before others and tells him that he is now rehabilitated and he will be remembered. So yeah, things definitely go a little crazy in Chamber 10, and it's stupendous. It's a good change of pace. I really like it for sure and consider it to be the best chamber alongside Chamber 8 the theater. It's pretty crazy how just switching up the objective can make things so much more interesting. The drawings are pretty crazy and interesting too, and clearly hinting towards something. Checking the game files, the drawing of the figure with her mommy next to her has the number 939 in it, a clear reference to the very unique and quite famous SCP-939. A fascinating, monstrous SCP that there's not really any point in me getting into here, since unfortunately, as I said earlier, there is still no actual plot that can be extracted from these drawings right now or the Discover program in general. I've asked the lead writer Gabriel about them and he says it's still not ready yet. It seems to be somewhat related to the Reproduction 939 article on the SCP website, but how that's actually going to relate to the story of the game is impossible for us to know right now. And that's it. That's the Discover program from start to finish. No checkpoints, no revives. If you die, it's back to the terminal to start again at Chamber 1. I tried to be as thorough as I could with this section, tried to explain everything I could about the mechanics, the enemies, the arenas, but most importantly, I really tried to like it. I have played through the Discover program probably dozens of times at this point, and try as I might, the simple fact is that the math here does not add up. It's a D-, even if I'm being super generous and include Chamber 4, which isn't really even that good. To summarize, at best, the Discover program is a generic zombie shooting gallery with cool maps and an interesting premise. At worst, it's a frustrating, tedious, and pretty boring experience that, I'm sorry to say, quite often made me want to just turn it off and play something else. It's a shame here that the narrative and premise and setting is so interesting because it's clearly second to the gameplay, which completely shapes the whole experience and unfortunately just is not fun. It is the same very much non-tactical, rudimentary, and clunky zombie blasting with slow, methodical movement that on its own isn't bad, but when you need to use it to face off against hordes of enemies, its flaws become clear as day. This isn't Call of Duty. There is no slide the prisoner can do, he can't clamber up ledges, even his jump sucks. When he lands on the ground after being in the air, he has to stop for a moment before he can start running again. It takes one of the most integral parts of a horde shooter, the movement, which can quite often be the only thing you have between living or dying, and makes it very unhelpful and very bland. All you can do is run away, turn around, shoot some heads, and then start running again. It's all the foundations of a tactical shooter stapled onto a horde shooter, and the two just don't mix here. And don't even get me started on the same recycled basic enemies from Area 12 that are at best stale and forgettable, or at worst broken and annoying. Maybe they deliberately made the experience of the Discover program hard to enjoy because they were trying to emulate what it would actually be like to be a D-class in this situation. And if that's the case, then haha, you got me. But seriously, it's rough, guys. It's rough, early access or not. The worst part of it is, and again, I can only speak for myself here, but I do know others feel the same way, the Discover program is simply not what I want from this game. A Frey Interactive doubled down on the absolute worst aspects of SCP-5K's gameplay, its awful gun-wielding enemy AI, basic movement, and dumb old zombie horde slogs that you can get better versions of out of any other game, and did not provide any of the methodical tactical gameplay I actually bought it for. It's further from the description of fear with SCP monsters than Area 12 ever was. It'd be one thing if they were able to make it into an actual fun horde shooter mode, which would still leave a strange taste in my mouth because I sure as hell don't think of that when I hear the words tactical horror, but it's not even that. It is very, very subpar with only 4 levels that are any decent, and one of them is entirely carried by the novelty of the environment instead of its actual gameplay. And listen man, like I've said, I desperately want this game to succeed. I want it to be everything it can be, and I didn't just pay the $20 either. I spent hours making my other videos, I bought a shirt, you know, all that. So trust me when I say this isn't coming from a place of snobbiness or hostility. I'm disappointed. That's my honest feedback. Even if you take out all the things I said about the extra stuff like 914 and the challenges, the loop of running around these chambers shooting the same old enemies gets boring way too fast. The underlying gameplay system of the Discover program is deeply flawed and does not deliver a satisfying experience. So is that it then? I mean, for the majority of this video, I have not really had many positive things to say about this game, and you wouldn't think I'd consider myself a very big fan of it. I didn't really like Area 12, whose SCP roster felt lackluster, whose gameplay was basic and tedious, and whose horror aspect was practically non-existent. I didn't like the extra game modes, most of which are basic testing grounds or unusable PvP maps with a very slapdash horde shooter mode thrown in. And I don't like the Discover program, whose issues are the very same ones that were present in the game all the way back in Area 12 that have not been refined in any way and can now no longer be excused just because the game is still in early access. So what is it about this game that warranted me taking the time to talk about all that? Why have I spent a month and a half already working on this video about this game I keep saying I love if all I have to say about it are negative things? What is the saving grace of SCP-5K? Ghosts of the South Gate is the only finished level in SCP-5K right now, and it is far and away not only the absolute best this game has to offer, it's probably one of the top 5 coolest levels I've ever played in a video game, period. I made a video a few months ago about it, and I actually consider that video to be my all-time favorite video I've ever made, and I don't attribute that as much to my own video making skills, but to just how spectacular the level is. It just has everything I wanted from the game: great horror elements, tactical, investigative gameplay, and an actual story told from beginning to end, complete with characters, plenty of intel logs, and even a voiced protagonist. Affray Interactive wanted to show us with Ghosts of the South Gate what they're capable of creating when they actually hunker down and bang out a full finished experience, and it's the reason why I'll never stop having hope for this game. Now, because I've already made a pretty extensive video on the story of this level, in the interest of saving time, I'm only going to give a brief rundown of its story here to ensure we're all on the same page. Then I'll move on to its SCPs, then its characters, then its gameplay, then its world, and then I'll wrap up the section by discussing the level as a whole. So let's get started. Ghosts of the South Gate puts the player in the rugged, spiked boots of Enoch, an operative of the United Nations Global Occult Coalition who has been deployed deep within Antarctica to investigate a civilian research station called NSIS-4 that's been suspected of having collaborated with the SCP Foundation in some way. Enoch's commanding officer, Captain Pinheiro of the NS Macready, has reportedly been in contact with the site's communication technician Marcus Benedict, but when Marcus started acting squirrely before going dark completely, and with confirmation that something fishy is going on with the Foundation being given from Crow Actual, who if you remember is the UIU coordinator that talks to the agent in the beginning of Area 12, Pinheiro and Enoch decide it's time to take a closer look. As Enoch explores the abandoned and decrepit station while being guided by Pinheiro over his radio, he learns more about what's happened here, and using his Mask of Emphalos, an arcane GOC technology which I will discuss more later, don't worry, Enoch is able to track the memory signatures of the station's deceased inhabitants and figure out what happened to them in their final moments. Enoch and Pinheiro learn that Marcus, the station's communications technician that Pinheiro had been talking to, had indeed been paid off by the Foundation to help them import testing equipment and other unknown supplies to NSIS-4, and once the ghosts show Enoch everything he needs to see, he soon learns what exactly those unknown supplies actually were. When Enoch is reactivating the power generators that got knocked out by the storm, horrifying red monsters rise from the snow and attack him, these monsters no doubt being connected to the Foundation's business here in some way. Escaping into the NSIS-4 research center, Enoch hunts for more clues on the situation and learns that a Foundation scientist named Dr. Nightingale is the one who's behind all of this. Dr. Nightingale was involved with an extensive research initiative called the Vector Program, and although her work was being monitored by the highest-ranking members of the Foundation's administration, the decision was made to pull her and her team from the site and stop the project, which had involved using the civilian workers of the station as human test subjects. In her desperation to prove the usefulness of her research, Nightingale inadvertently caused a containment breach of SCP-610, an apocalyptically powerful microbe with various anomalous and highly destructive characteristics that served as the main point of research for her and her team here at NSIS-4. After discussing his findings with Pinheiro, Enoch leaves the research center and steps outside into the innermost part of the NSIS-4 complex, which he sees has been absolutely ravaged by SCP-610. Monstrous spires of disgusting organic matter rise from the ice and tower into the sky, and Enoch tells Pinheiro that the only option to get rid of all this for good is to use an MRG, a kind of incredibly powerful spell seldom used by the GOC that will wipe everything in its area of effect from ever having existed in the first place. Pinheiro reluctantly agrees with Enoch, even though it means neither of them will be making it out alive either. Because the ramifications of using an MRG are far more serious than, say, simply nuking the place, Pinheiro tells Enoch that they will need more intel for their superiors at Ganzir, the capital city of the GOC, trust me, we'll get to them later, to justify the MRG's deployment, and so Enoch heads into the NSIS-4 hospital, which he learned from reading Nightingale's journal is where she conducted her experiments on SCP-610 using the NSIS-4 workers, and the place where where she caused the containment breach. Stepping into the hospital, ground zero of the outbreak, Enoch sees the worst conditions yet. The building itself is being consumed by SCP-610 and it's falling apart, but when Enoch is locked inside, he has no choice but to look for another way out. After fighting through enough of the nightmarish hospital that is quite literally crawling with SCP-610, Enoch meets none other than Dr. Nightingale in the flesh. At this point, Nightingale is barely alive anymore, and all she's able to do is hand Enoch the final evidence he needs, her confession that the Foundation is preparing for war. Nightingale and her crew here were unknowingly tasked with engineering a bioweapon, and they did just that using SCP-610 at the cost of their own and everyone else's lives at NSIS-4. Just as Enoch is about to leave the hospital, he looks outside of a destroyed room to see that the enormous aquatic creature SCP-2674 is here as well, and it too is infected by SCP-610. When he steps back outside, he hears Pinheiro over his radio say that it's awakened and attacking the ship, and Enoch needs to end this fast. Heading back over to the research center, Enoch begins uploading his intel to Ganzir and defends the satellite, facilitating the upload from the final onslaught of SCP-610. When the upload is complete, Enoch delivers a funeral rite for not just himself and Pinheiro, but everyone else he's about to save before the MRG's cleansing white light washes away all the misery of NSIS-4 and the level ends. It is masterful. Everything about the narrative, the writing, the performances, its presentation, the world building, even down to the damn title of the level, everything is just exquisite. My little summary of it here did it absolutely no justice. Ghosts of the Southgate is a fascinating, horrifying, and curiously moving tale of catastrophe and redemption at the bottom of the world, and serves as concrete proof of Afray Interactive's ability to tell a magnificent story. Let's talk about the characters. There's really only 4 of them worth noting, and they're all great in their own ways. Pinheiro, Marcus, Nightingale, and of course Enoch. We'll start simple with Pinheiro, since he's a pretty basic Cortana voice-in-your-ear character, and even though he's nothing groundbreaking, damned if he doesn't get the job done. Pinheiro is helpful, intelligent, and seems like an all-around good dude. Hard to ask for anything else when it comes to his type of character, and he even has a little moment in the end where he says goodbye to Enoch one last time. Even though we barely know anything about the history between the two, it's touching how they call each other brothers before they both make the ultimate sacrifice. The level wouldn't be the same without him. Even though we never get to see him and he's just a disembodied voice all the way through, he still gives Ghosts of the Southgate that much more depth and scale by serving as a reminder that the world of the game stretches beyond what you, the player, can see. Overall, Pinheiro's got a pretty small role, but it's one he plays flawlessly. Next up, we have Marcus Benedict, who was just an ordinary person before everything went down. Seemingly well-liked and trusted by his coworkers who he considered his friends, but when the shady SCP Foundation promised him riches and security if he were to allow them entry into the station and cover their tracks for them, Marcus agreed to help them and paid the price dearly. Now, something I didn't know while making my story summary video on this level is that Marcus is actually voiced by Peter Maloney, who was in John Carpenter's 1982 horror classic The Thing, which served as a huge inspiration for various elements of the level. Guy gave one hell of a performance here. It's hard as not to feel bad for Marcus. In my eyes, he's really just as much a victim of the Foundation as all his coworkers were, and in the story he's immaculately written and portrayed as the tragic civilian element of the disaster at NSIS-4. However, hands down the most unique character of Ghosts of the Southgate is the villain, the gleefully arrogant and pretty damn evil Dr. Nightingale. I think the best way to describe Dr. Nightingale is that she's sort of a cross between a valley girl and a Nazi scientist, which would be interesting enough on its own, but the way she's handled in the story is equally original and subversive. Nightingale is naive, but still immoral at the same time. She seems to believe that with her research here at NSIS-4, humanity will no longer be victims of disease, but instead its controllers, which, if a little ignorant, is a noble cause to pursue, I guess, but she pursues it by experimenting on human test subjects and happily ignoring their mistreatment at the hands of Foundation Foundation MTF teams that were sent to NSIS-4 along with her. Here's an interesting point about her as well. Do you remember way back in the video when I discussed the Area 12 guard voice acting, how individuals cured of SCP-5000 lose all of their ability to feel? Well, Dr. Nightingale isn't cured. She's still a regular person who is still able to feel everything like excitement, frustration, and most importantly empathy, but she chooses to ignore the latter in the pursuit of her own goals, sacrificing others in the name of her research, which would be wrong even if she didn't think her research was going to be going towards curing disease, and it's made even more wrong by the fact that it seems she played right into the Foundation's hand and made them a highly potent bioweapon instead. However, actually meeting Nightingale in the level is the most unique thing about her and is very much unlike a traditional hero-villain showdown. The whole time while I was playing, I was expecting Nightingale to either be long gone or long dead, but if she were to be still alive, I was eagerly awaiting the opportunity to drag her out by her heels and make her pay. But when you actually find her, it's pretty sobering to see that she's already suffered quite a bit. It's a good twist, one that I'd argue is much more effective than any old boss fight could have been. The whole level, you're itching for a confrontation, and when you finally get it, all you have for Nightingale at this point isn't hatred, but instead pity. It's a great way of humanizing her without excusing her. Even if, in her final tape, Nightingale never really takes proper responsibility for the atrocities she's perpetrated at NSIS-4 and maintained until the very end that she was tricked and deceived by the Foundation into turning innocent civilians into meatball monsters, she's still a fascinating character, and Enoch sets her free all the same. And lastly, we of course have Enoch himself, who seamlessly brings the whole level together as any good protagonist should. Enoch is the quintessential proper player character. I've said in previous videos how easy it is to write a good voiced player character for a game, and he's just a perfect example of how they're always going to be better than a silent protagonist. Don't get me wrong, Enoch is no masterclass in character writing, but he didn't need to be. He just needs to act like an actual human being would in this scenario, and he does that and more. Enoch goes beyond just saying something to point out what's happening to Pinheiro and the player, and there are a few times where he shows a very welcome degree of humanity, such as when he forlornly recommends using the MRG to Pinheiro, the Bible verse he recites in the ending, and my personal favorite when he loses Pinheiro's signal in the hospital. There's a moment where he's crawling through a disgusting, nightmarish flesh corridor and he hears Pinheiro's voice over his radio crackle into static, and he just says, that's it. That's all it takes. It's such a tiny little moment, but it goes so far in bringing you into the game. If he were a silent protagonist, there would be no connection here whatsoever. It'd just be you, the player, as a silent pair of arms wandering through a creepy set piece. Woohoo! But Enoch serves as an emotional tether for the player and the game, and now the level has weight to it because you can hear how crawling through a flesh tunnel actually affects a person who's really experiencing it. It doesn't feel like some abstract digital haunted house that's only there for you, the player, to react to. You're not playing as some boring old blank slate mute. It's real for this guy, and he hates it, but he keeps going anyway. And Enoch goes beyond all that further still, and that's thanks to him being a member of the UNGOC, which, as I have explained previously, is a major faction in the SCP universe, and it is absolutely tremendous to see them being expertly brought to life in this level with Enoch, Pinheiro, the MRG, and everything else. In the SCP universe, the GOC are a very powerful faction and no strangers to the anomalous, as is shown here with Enoch and Pinheiro when they encounter the ghosts of the workers. It's made very clear that neither of them are scared or unsettled by the ghosts of Marcus or Justine, and instead correctly conclude that the ghosts want to guide and assist them. When the ghosts lock a door behind Enoch, trapping him in a house, he doesn't freak out, he just assumes that they must have something important for him to find here, and he's right, it's inside Marcus's house where Enoch learns what he was really doing. It's just really simple, great writing. Enoch is experienced with interacting with the anomalous and magical, and even if you, the player, are weirded out by it, there's no reason for him to be. And this wraps back around again to his decision to use the MRG and his other little humanity moments. Enoch took one look at this place and quite wisely decided that things need to be taken care of here before they get even more out of hand, which is saying something because, as I just said, he has experience with this stuff. When he curses under his breath, it's not some basic in-over-his-head grunt saying it, it's a magical Master Chief saying it, so you know this is some heavy shit here. I mean, I could go round and round endlessly about how well he plays his part in the level and all his little intricacies, but we'll come back to Enoch and Pinheiro again when I discuss the GOC and how they enhance the world of the game in a bit though. For now, let's move on to the big bad, SCP-610. SCP-610 is a deadly anomalous skin disease capable of easily infecting any living organism it comes into contact with and also spreading itself across inanimate objects. Infected individuals experience rapid necrosis followed by rapid scar tissue growth, and as their mind deteriorates to nothing but the desire to spread the disease, their bodies transform into monstrous amalgamations of festering red meat. But that's not all. It seems as though infected individuals are able to combine with one another to form entire golems of plague that are much larger and formidable than individual infected. But that's still not all. SCP-610 itself can take form. The microbe seems to be able to multiply on its own, not always needing a warm body to do it, and can consume entire buildings and form massive spires of its own raw material. SCP-610 is interesting thematically because every infected human you fight against represents a part of its whole. It's really just one single entity, a large hive mind that above all else desires to grow and spread itself, and the way its scale ramps up as the level goes on is simply flawless. At first, it really just seems like any old other zombie virus, but as the level goes on, it grows and spreads throughout the station, and you can even see it actively consuming some of the buildings that you're in. However, what is easily the most unsettling aspect about SCP-610 is how it sustains the life of the organisms it consumes, so everything in this room is still alive. Again, I could talk about SCP-610 forever, but to keep things moving, I'll just say that SCP-610 in Ghosts of the Southgate is disgusting, disturbing, and dreadful. An excellently executed SCP that fills its role in the level perfectly, easily carrying the combat entirely on its own as the only true antagonistic force Enoch ever actually fights against. However, SCP-610 is not the only SCP present in Ghosts of the Southgate, even though it definitely could have been, but we'll get back to the other SCP in just a bit because now it's time to discuss the level's actual gameplay. Once again, it bears mentioning that Ghosts of the Southgate features fully fledged cooperative play, which works about as well as it does in Area 12. We had no major issues at all, and once again, it is very much optional. Matter of fact, it's interesting to note that nobody acknowledges that Enoch has any squad mates. It seems to be non-canonical, so it must be doing like the Halo thing where it's just two Enochs, like how in Halo there's just two Master Chiefs when you play co-op. Anyway, now as I have made clear in the other sections of this video, the vast majority of gameplay offered by SCP-5K is unfortunately not what I would consider to be very fun, but I am overjoyed to say that Ghosts of the Southgate's gameplay does indeed fit the definition of tactical horror. Before we get to that though, the other type of gameplay this level has that the rest of the game is missing as well is actual investigative gameplay. So what do I mean by that? Well, remember how in Area 12 the agent doesn't really actually do anything and basically just strolls through the place pressing buttons and taking elevators for no real reason that we know of, and the environment is bland and barren with no environmental storytelling whatsoever beyond everything is screwed. Ghosts of the Southgate does not have that problem. Not only are the environments way more detailed and fun to explore, Enoch has an actual job to do here. He's not going around flipping switches and turning valves just because he's bored. The objectives in Ghosts of the Southgate not only make sense but are very interesting and help bring this crazy setting to life. This aspect is most evident with Enoch's absolutely tremendous Mask of Omphalos, the arcane GOC technology I mentioned earlier that's been built into his helmet, which replaces the standard NVGs that the other player characters have. The Mask of Omphalos is amazingly well implemented. Lore-wise, it's a tremendous blend of mystical and advanced technology, a perfect embodiment of the GOC's identity, and gameplay-wise, it transforms what would be an otherwise pretty basic exploration mission into a captivating ghost hunt. The mask's mimetic vision allows allows for the story to be conveyed in real time in an interesting way without any interruption to the gameplay. You're not sitting there listening to an audio log, you're witnessing the final echoes of dead people and exploring this eerie abandoned outpost alongside them. The Mask of Omphalos is kind of hard to see with too, it sort of obscures everything in order to highlight mimetic signatures, so exploring with it is a good bit creepy, and I always found myself switching it on and off to make sure nothing was going to attack me from the darkness. It really adds to the paranoia of exploring NSIS-4, and plus another cool detail is that if you turn it on while in the hospital, you can see that everything here emits a mimetic signature, meaning that all of this meat is not only alive but still capable of feeling too. Yikes. Ugh. Anyway, I'm happy to say that Enoch doesn't feel like just an aimless wanderer thrown into NSIS-4 for no reason. He is actually here to investigate what's happened, and the moment-to-moment explorative gameplay along with the objectives convey that very well. As I'm writing all this, I still don't think I'm quite putting into words how good everything about this level is, but we gotta keep it moving. Now comes the most important part where I explain that Affray Interactive has indeed demonstrated in this level an understanding of how to mix enemy design with level design, and the combat in Ghosts of the Southgate is bona fide tactical horror, baby. So let's start with the enemies. In the level, SCP-610 when fought as an enemy takes the form of the Gibberim and the Nephilim. Gibberim being the name given to individual infected human enemies, and Nephilim being the name given to the larger and more powerful golems. Gibberim are the most common form of SCP-610, and during combat they will run towards Enoch and try to whack him. Now I know what you guys are thinking, wait 1 second, these guys are just zombies, and I've said multiple times now in this video that zombies are freaking boring and don't offer any kind of methodical combat, right? Well, watch this. That's right, these bad boys have ranged attacks. They don't always just run towards you. Not only do they have a meatball blast that sends a disgusting flying tendril through the air at their target, they also have this gnarly other one where they shove a limb into the ground and it extends downward through the snow and explodes back up at their target. That alone is good enough. With these ranged attacks, they've already been elevated above ordinary dumb zombies and definitely require an extra degree of thought being given to kill them, but that's still not all. Just like the regular zombies from Area 12, Gibberim will get back up after they've been knocked down, but unlike the regular zombies, they actually do it pretty quickly, so even as few as 4 or 5 of them can get overwhelming if you're not paying attention to both the ones coming at you and the ones you've already shot down. They can only get up a limited number of times, maybe only twice or 3 times total, but they seem to always get back up at least once, and again, there's more thought required here than see zombie, shoot zombie, move on to next zombie. Now Nephilim on the other hand are a bit more simple. They don't have any real long ranged attacks, and all you have to do to take care of them is keep your distance and pour it on, but that's okay here since they're already designed well enough as big melee bosses, and they play off the Gibberim as big tanks that take up all your attention. So they're good, but remember, level design also needs to play a part in making these enemies feel tactical and fun, and the level design in Ghosts of the Southgate does indeed accomplish this. Now, a big part of making level design work with enemy design in a game, especially a tactical shooter, is how you introduce the enemies and actually set up the fights. Remember when I discussed Area 12, I talked about how they have all these cool ways of setting up these fights, but the enemy AI just isn't enough to make them any fun? Well, here, the SCP-610 AI and enemy design is good to go, so how do they work alongside the level design? By doing that, yes, as you are exploring the NSIS-4 research station, SCP-610 monsters will occasionally decide to rise up from the snow and attack you on the spot. That alone, again, is already a step above simply funneling them out a doorway, but it goes even further. You'll have noticed by now that during the events of Ghosts of the Southgate, NSIS-4 is experiencing an intense snowstorm that's moving across the entire region. Not only does the snowstorm make for some amazing visuals, it also has a direct effect effect on the gameplay. Because of the extreme weather and the very limited visibilities, enemies can come from any direction and a fight can pop off at any moment. At any time, you'll be walking along and you'll see SCP-610 emerge from the darkness right in front of you. But the way these enemies are introduced isn't only stupendous when you're outside. When Enoch enters the NSIS-4 medical center, the Gibberim are still a major threat. And once again, the level design is used to introduce them in a creative, surprising way by having them emerge from the grotesque SCP-610 flesh mass on the walls and floors of the building. So all of that is already very good. We've got good enemies, we've got good level design, but how does the player character handle? One of the things I've mentioned a few times in this video is that the movement in SCP-5K is really nothing too spectacular. The game places a very heavy emphasis on realistic movement. None of these guys are running on walls, so if the movement isn't really that dynamic in any way, how can you make it fun? Ghosts of the South Gate makes it fun by making it actually strategic. Remember how in the Discover program, the basic movement system of the game is not only pretty boring, but also barely up to the task of enabling the prisoner to deal with massive hordes of enemies that are almost just as fast as he is? In Ghosts of the South Gate, Enoch still has the same basic movement abilities, but here, the basic movement, instead of being boring, ramps up the immersion and encourages a slow, methodical gameplay style. You're not a Titanfall pilot blazing through everything. Enoch is really just a standard issue human male with good cardio. You have to take a deep breath and crawl your way through the nightmare hell flesh rooms, and it's freaking creepy. So much weight has been given to such a simple aspect. Instead of the movement here feeling boring or insufficient, enemies, level design, and environmental hazards are truly built around this basic movement, and elevate it from being bland and boring to being strategic and tense. But that's still not all. Now, Enoch is gonna have a lot of shit to deal with while working his way through NSIS-4, and it's safe to say the guy's gonna be taking some hits. However, because he's in the Antarctic Circle, his Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't cover him anymore, and hunting around the place for medical supplies to heal himself with can be a bit of a pain sometimes. Thankfully for us, Enoch is a member of the GOC, which unlike the UIU is not underfunded and under-equipped. Listen to this. Enoch's uniform contains a species of anomalous sentient algae that courses through his clothing and armor to repair it whenever it takes damage. If Enoch loses a bit of health but is still above a certain threshold, you won't have to go looking around for any medkits. He'll actually automatically regenerate his health back, and it's another detail that sets him apart from the other more basic player characters. There's also other stuff about how flares can be used to light up environments and stagger enemies and set them on fire, and how level design also provides the player with multiple methods of approaching situations, and how sound design plays a part in exploration and engagements. But I think I've talked enough to get the point across. Perfect. Everything is perfect. I could have stopped at the ranged attacks for SCP-610 alone, and the gameplay probably could have already been good enough, but just like everything else in this level, they just kept adding extra layers. And the enemies, the level design, and the player character all come together to form an incredibly engaging experience. If this isn't tactical horror, I don't know what is. This is the finest example of this genre I have seen since Fear 1 itself, and I do not say that lightly. Okay, we got story, we got characters, we got SCPs, and we got gameplay. Now, let's move on to how Ghosts of the South Gate explosively develops the world of SCP-5K. First off, as I said earlier, the GOC is brought to life in this level so amazingly well, and it's especially sick how all of those elements are not only present here, but integrated into the gameplay, like with Enoch's mimetic vision and his health regenerating. But there are also other smaller details too, like how he has wording runes imprinted all over his outfit that bring ruin to his enemies and protect him from harm. The biblical elements were very well done here as well. Usually any kind of biblical influence in a video game starts and stops at like the church level or the priest character, you know what I mean? Here, the biblical elements aren't just set dressing. Enoch is very cleverly named considering his story, and the Bible verse he recites during the MRG lands really well, so it's not just some throw away extra flavor, and better yet, it's not layered on too thick to the point of not being impactful. Enoch and Pinheiro being religious also adds another bit of humanity. Maybe their faith is what keeps them going through all this, but more importantly, it also adds to the identity of the GOC as being a bit ritualistic and kooky. These guys aren't just regular old G.I. Joes, they're future soldier wizards, and they're a lot of fun. What would be really crazy is if GOC player characters in this game could actually do like spells and stuff during combat. I hope to see the GOC's magic play a bigger role in combat someday. Oh, by the way, earlier I mentioned that the GOC have their own capital city called Ganzir, constructed somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean and kept hidden from the rest of the world using magical concealment sorcery. The GOC are just nutty, such an awesome blend of sci-fi and fantasy, and even though it's only in this level in name alone, it being mentioned once again furthers the idea that the world of the game goes beyond the eyes of the player and makes it feel that much more lived in. We also have some stellar art direction on display with the GOC. The color palette of the whole level is very well done, as a matter of fact. The white snow and blood red hues of SCP-610 go so well together, but of course Enoch himself looks fly as shit. I still think the D-Class design reigns supreme because remember the ceiling I talked about, but I really love the hood he wears and the Titanfall visor is just mint. Plus there's all the cool runes I mentioned earlier, and of course he has his own unique version of the integrated health bar with the algae tubes on his forearm. It's a shame we never get to see what Pinheiro looks like. I like to imagine he wears a cool blue beret that shows his status, but I have no doubt that if we ever do get to see what a high-ranking GOC member really looks like, they're going to be absolutely gnarly. Now let's head over to the other SCP in this level and how it too expands on the world of the game even more. SCP-2764's article on the SCP website explains that it's a massive aquatic creature located right down here in Antarctica with various anomalous properties including telepathic communication, some form of limited teleportation, and apparently being able to influence how its size is perceived. Nobody knows how large it is exactly. Estimates of its dimensions and weight are all that exist. And wouldn't you know it, it's right below NSIS-4, and during the events of Ghosts of the South Gate, it's been infected by SCP-610. At the end of the level, it's what goes over to the NS MacCready and attacks Pinheiro and the rest of the crew. Even though we never really get to fight it or interact with it in any way, it's still really sick and makes for a gnarly visual. Although the only small issue I have is that the storm and fog actually diminish the effect a little bit. If you brighten up the scene, you can actually see SCP-2764 is going all the way out to the mountains in the distance carrying SCP-610 along with it, but if you just play normally, you would never actually see that because it's too dark. Still though, it's awesome, and I wanted to mention 2764 here at the end because it kind of encapsulates what works so well about Ghosts of the South Gate, which is that everything in this level feels as though it's been fully realized. In Area 12, the SCP roster feels disappointingly small because it's a giant Foundation facility that really only has a handful of different types of monsters, and most of them are just that, basic monsters. So not only are the SCPs in Area 12 buggy and unfinished to begin with, they're made more disappointing by the context of the level. We're in one of the Foundation's leading parabiological research facilities that's having a containment breach, and all we get are some chickens, crabs, and zombies. Now compare that to the context of Ghost of the South Gate. Here we're at some random civilian research station in the middle of nowhere Antarctica. There's no reason at all to expect any SCP should be here, which not only excuses the fact that SCP-610 is the only one we get to interact with, it also makes it that much more unnatural and unsettling. It being the only SCP too would have been good enough, but once again Affray Interactive took it just a little bit further and added SCP-2764 for good measure, even if it doesn't really do anything. However, here SCP-2764 not having any features or major role to play doesn't feel disappointing. I wasn't expecting it to be here anyway, so it making an appearance doesn't feel like it's unrealized or unfinished. It feels like added depth to an already amazingly rich world. Ghosts of the South Gate is just so alive, maybe a little too alive in some areas. From the GOC to the characters to the lore to the ghosts themselves, and pair all that with the fact that the gameplay is freaking really good as well, and we got ourselves some distilled tactical horror. Even though its total runtime is maybe only an hour tops, it's got everything you could ask ask for from this game: plot, horror, world building, gameplay. It's a dark, wondrous adventure that takes you to the depths of despair and ends up being something truly beautiful. And that's going to be it, everybody. I have covered every single aspect of SCP-5K 0.17 build today on October 18th, 2025. Now for this last segment, I'm actually not going to do anything really all that special. I'm just going to throw up some gameplay footage and finish up, okay? I'm not going to play any corny, melodramatic music and talk about how this game changed my life and I can't stand to see it go down like this. Because 1, that'd be disingenuous, 2, I don't have enough time anyway, and 3, I am not an authority figure on this game. Everyone is free to form their own opinions. My opinion, that I hope you've picked up on by now based on what I've presented, however, is that at the time of recording this on October 18th of 2025, SCP-5K is struggling with both an identity crisis and a pretty serious case of early access-itis. Listen, again, I believe in Affray Interactive. I have seen that they can make amazing things, but what can I say? Again, check the math. And you know what else is icing on top of the cake? I checked the Discord today, and guess what? They're going to be updating the classic wave survival mode. Remember the really shitty one with the guard in the little tunnel that I spent all of 3 minutes talking about because of how bad it was? Now, this brings me to another question. Should Affray even work on improving what they have now if what they have now is not tactical horror? What's the good in even improving these game modes if they're not going to be what anybody's buying the game for? Like, why is polish and time going towards these side modes that not only aren't fun but aren't the game? You guys are making the wrong game. I understand that SCP-5K is an early access and Affray is trying to keep all their hungry mouths fed with these horde shooter modes, but I'm sorry, I have seen way too many early access games do this exact same thing. Release buggy, unfinished updates as players slowly grow accustomed to them, and then when the well runs dry from the early access cache, release a buggy, unfinished 1.0 build. Now, I'm not trying to call Affray Interactive a bunch of scammers. I should hope that they recoiled in horror at the very thought of what I just said, but forgive me, I have seen this exact pattern play out before and I really do not want to see it happen to this game. Again, I know Affray can make this game everything it can be, but quite frankly, the clock's ticking, guys. We're multiple years in now and the main campaign has just been rotting away, and that blanked out roadmap on the official website isn't assuaging my fears. When I first started making this video, I was concerned that I would be biased towards liking the game too much and I would maybe embellish things, but after playing through it and seeing that Affray is doubling down again on whatever this horde shooter shit is, I'm not left with any other options. And so here it comes, the absolute hardest thing for me to say in this whole video. I do not recommend that you buy SCP-5K right now on October 18th of 2025, because you're not buying SCP-5K. You are not buying an SCP tactical shooter, you are getting this. It's the craziest thing. I can buy the game myself, spend hours making these videos, buy a shirt to show my support, but what I cannot do is actually recommend that anyone else buys it right now on October 18th of 2025. Because when all the signs I'm given and keep being given indicate that this game is going to slowly bleed out and die just like all the other access games that did this exact same thing before it, I'd rather just save my friends $20 until I actually see Affray start working on SCP-5K again and not whatever this is. But once again, the saving grace of it all is Ghosts of the South Gate. I saved that level for last because I didn't want to end on this game sucks. It doesn't. It has tons of potential and an already really amazing hour-long adventure in it, but Ghosts of the South Gate kind of illustrates something else I've been wanting to say about this game for a while. The original story of SCP-5000 has truly amazing scale. It is a worldwide event that all the armies, monsters, and gods of the SCP universe partake in, with one guy at the center of it. And you know what? Ghosts of the South Gate illustrates that masterfully. With the GOC, the civilians, this world feels alive, and I know and feel that there are things going on beyond the cold plains of Antarctica. And frankly, 8 or 9 of these types of missions about like clandestine operations being carried out against or maybe even by the Foundation in the time leading up to the war could make for a amazing game. But instead, the main campaign of the full game is just going to be about the agent going through Area 12, a single Foundation facility in West Virginia. Even if it's longer than Ghosts of the South Gate, I'm not sure Area 12 is going to give us that same scale and weight, but I am sure that we're not going to be getting it from any horde shooter modes. I honestly think that the magic of Ghosts of the South Gate was in how it clearly defined its scope. Listen, I know I'm throwing around like project management terms and stuff like that, but I'm not trying to tell any Afraid devs how to make their game. I'm just trying to explain and give feedback based on what I'm picking up. So again, please don't take any offense and feel free to disregard what I say anyway, but here goes. Ghosts of the South Gate only has one actual SCP, and with that limitation, not only was Afraid Interactive able to explore SCP-610 to the fullest extent, the level only having one SCP didn't make the world of the game feel any smaller at all. The level truly feels like the start of something bigger, and it ends with even more implications about the world with the MRG. I just get absolutely none of that from Area 12 though, you know what I mean? No characters, no people, no news broadcasts or anything, nothing. Please, Afraid, try and think of a way to make this place feel more alive, because right now, the whole time I'm playing through it, I'm not fascinated by what I'm seeing down here. I'm just wishing I could be outside with the rest of the world of the game. Alright, I'm rambling. Let's wrap it up here. This video has gone on long enough. In conclusion, my feedback and review is that SCP-5K has a brilliant premise, great lore, really cool guns, awesome character designs, visual fidelity, the list goes on, but right now there is simply no game for any of that stuff to be used in. Now, let's be fair here. Afraid Interactive is a team of independent developers, and for many of them, this is their first time even working on a proper game like this. So frankly, they've been able to do some amazing things already, especially with Ghost of the South Gate. My feedback is to please keep doing that. Make amazing things. Don't try to be Call of Duty Zombies. Don't try to be the Outlast Trials. SCP-5K is at its best when it's being SCP-5K. Now, something else I want to say is that I'm not going anywhere. Even if SCP-5K does actually end up dying a slow, painful early access death and never reaches its full potential, I will be here observing every step of the way and doing everything I can to help. I'd also like to say again as well that I deeply regret choosing this game to do my first review on, which again isn't really a slight on the game itself, but obviously I don't think I quite hit the right balance of ensuring I laid everything out for everyone to see and also being concise enough for a potential buyer to get all the info they need in a quick watch. But I also regret it because of the questions at the heart of reviewing an early access game to begin with. Is it even possible to diagnose a game with early accessitis if it's still in early access? I don't know, but what I do know wouldn't be of any benefit is not giving any feedback, so I had to say something, and I ended up yapping for almost 3 hours. Alright, it's seriously time to finish things up here, folks. I want to end again by saying if you haven't bought the game yet, maybe save 20 bucks and wait for some more proper content. But if you have bought the game and disagree with any of my points, please leave a comment. I read and respond to every single one of them unless the notification gets lost, and in that case, just leave another one. And finally, if any Afraid devs actually made it this far, thank you very much, I'm flattered, and I hope you take the length of this video and the time I spent making it as proof that I believe in you guys. But not only do you all have tremendous potential, you're all pretty friendly and cool too, and that's why I wanted to spend as much time as necessary giving my viewpoints. You know, this goes beyond just saying I don't like the recent update for me. It's really my way of trying to help out. I want nothing more than to be a complete laughingstock of the community and to be able to look back on this video and think, what an idiot, SCP-5K turned out great and all that fuss was for nothing. But ultimately, whether or not I'm going to be able to do that is up to you. That's not meant to be a threat or anything either. I just, the video's over. Thank you very much to the patrons and everyone for watching. Goodbye.